music. Wave beats music.
Good morning, Suprabhat. Once again, welcome to the fourth webinar in the series of webinars that NISA, National Independent Schools Alliance, is organizing in collaboration with Bhartiya Shikshan Mandal. In this fourth webinar, we are going to broadly discuss the quality of education. And for quality of education, the foremost important thing is what all we are going to do for the teachers' education, training, engagement, performance, assessment. As we know, there is a huge focus on early childhood care and education. At the same time, the foundational literacy and numeracy, which I think is the most significant part in the context of this new national education policy. So I welcome all our participants to this another exciting webinar where we are going to discuss all the possibilities, challenges, hope, aspirations, scopes, and ways forward so that the new national education policy can be implemented to reach its objectives. In this case, we have another exciting panel, and to welcome and do the brief introduction on behalf of NISA, we have Mr. Deepak Khetan. Deepak Khetan ji runs a school, a wonderful entrepreneurial school based in Goa. It's called the Sunshine School, and I have had fortune to visit the school a couple of times. Mr. Deepak Khetan is also the Vice President for Quality in NISA. So Deepak Khetan ji, I welcome you to give the brief introduction of all speakers and formally welcome.
Thank you, Amit. And namaste
Thank
to
you,
all
sir.
the participants. It is wonderful to be part of this quality initiative taken by NISA to make everyone aware of the new education policy and the quality education, how will be implemented. So I welcome you all as Vice President Initiatives of NISA. NISA, I'm sure most of you are aware, is the National Independent Schools Alliance. And if we have associations across the country who are members of NISA. It is one of the biggest unaided private schools association in the country. And today, my dear friends, we have a great panel starting with Dr. Rita Sunawat, a wonderful person. I've met her many times personally, and she is a full listing of knowledge. And today, with her presence here, you will be able to learn a lot from her. She is Director, Ampersand Group. She is also the former Dean and Head of Department of the Human Development at SNDT, Women's University. She was selected as the global leader for early child care and education by the World Forum Foundation Montreal in 2005. Dr. Sunawat is also a recipient of the National Award for Teacher Trainer in Innovative Training and Faculty Research Fellowship by Canadian Institute. I welcome you, Dr. Rita, for this panel discussion. Then we have Dr. Senthil Kumaran. I have had a privilege of attending a 6-day training process with him, and he's my guru. He keeps guiding. Welcome, Dr. Senthil, and it's a pleasure to have you on this panel. With you around, nothing will be left unanswered, I'm sure,
Thank you very much, Deepak.
because he's well informed and well read. Is the chief confluencer of the Learners Confluence, and with over 3 decades of experience in the educational field, Dr. Senthil has started groundbreaking work in the form of the Learners Confluence and Educational Service in India. Dr. Senthil was the principal counselor and head education excellence initiatives of CII Institute of Quality until July 31st, 2016. Dr. Senthil worked as a faculty member of the strategic core group in Christ College, now Christ University, Bangalore, for 10 years before embarking on the journey with CII IQ. Welcome, Dr. Senthil,
Namaste.
to
Looking
the
forward.
panel. From Anisa, namaskar, and Anisa, welcome to you. Dr. Abhinav Mathur is another panelist we have, is the founder and chairman of Million Sparks Foundation, a
Hello.
wonderful organization where they keep doing wonderful work. I've met him personally, and he's a gem of a person. He has worked for 24 years in leadership roles in large multinational corporations. He ran cutting-edge innovative global businesses in areas such as monthly mobility, telecommunication, financial technology, entertainment, healthcare, and education. He has co-founded Million Sparks Foundation in 2015 to give back to the society by contributing to the education space. Dr. Abhinav is a PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow, and a bachelor's in engineering from NSIT, Delhi. Abhinav has set up several startups as part of one of the world's first technology incubators. He serves on board of several high-grown companies, advises startups for growth, and is an avid angel investor. Welcome, Abhinav Mathurji,
Thank you.
and
Thank
I'm
you for
sure
having me.
the panel will benefit with your inputs.
Thank you.
For joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Gayatri RP is the director of program at 321. Prior to 321, Gayatri was the COO of Hippocampus, where she took the idea of running 250 preschool centers across the country. She is also the former project head of R&D division at Educom Solutions. Welcome, Ms. Gayatri, and I'm sure with your experience of running 250 preschools, you're throwing light on the preschool, getting into national education policy will be of really useful, beneficial to all the participants here. Welcome, Ms. Gayatri. Ms. Aruna Saraswati has worked in the field of education for 4 decades now. She has been a teacher, principal, and administrator. She joined Bhartiya Shikshan Mandal, and since then, in 1992, and since then has made immense contributions in variety of roles. She is also a member of the Juvenile Justice Board, Government of Madhya Pradesh, and Children Welfare Committee, Government of Madhya Pradesh. There are a number of publications to her credit and actively contributes to the welfare of society through a number of social welfare organizations. Welcome, Ms. Aruna Saraswati. I'm sure with your social work experience and the Juvenile Justice Board experience, this throwing light on quality in NEP will really benefit all the participants. So I welcome once again all the panelists and all the participants to this series of webinars that we are conducting with Bhartiya Shikshan Mandal and NISA together. Over to you, Amit, for taking it forward and have a wonderful discussion. Let's make some quality output from this initiative. Thank you, and NISA Namaskar to everyone.
Thank you very, very much, Deepak Khetanji. Let me also remind that we also have Dr. Ashok Thakurji with us, who is जिनको मैं कहता हूं सूत्रधार हैं इस पूरे सीरीज को जो हम ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं. Anyways, let's come back to the key topic without wasting further more time. So in this webinar, we are going to focus mainly on the challenges of quality teaching. As we see that the new national education policy has recommended multiple reforms, which if implemented would bring a huge change in the Indian education system. And before we start taking our speakers, let me briefly set the context. So hopefully my screen is visible to all. So I would not elaborate upon, but just list down what are the key recommendations coming out of the new national education policy in terms of improving the teaching and learning. So the objective of new national education policy to meet the SDG goal 4, which is ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning. The new national education policy broadly thinks of how do we make India a global knowledge superpower. So this is what we are trying to achieve through new national education policy. Some of the salient features. One thing is that the 10+2 model of education that we have had so far is going to change to something called 5+3+3+4 model. And so now it will, instead of 6 to 14, now it will focus from 3 to 18 years of education. There is huge focus on early childhood care and education. There is a target, and I find it a very smart goal, foundational literacy and numeracy to be achieved by 2025 in all primary schools, 100% gross enrollment in 5+3+3+4 by 2030, which is roughly goes up to, let's say, 50% or so, or a little beyond that. The idea is also that the report card that kids receive so far is basically about their academic performance. Now the progress report should give parents a 360-degree progress report, thinking about their cognitive development, psychomotor development, affective learning, everything. The medium of instruction to be in mother tongue. Also in the middle stage, roughly around 6th grade onwards, also introduce 21st century skills, what we call, like artificial intelligence, design thinking, machine learning, etc. There is also focus on how do we make education more and more relevant, such as integration of skill education, vocational education. On this regard, there is a provision that there should be at least 10 days of bagless classes. And this has actually started happening in some of these states. About schools, there is also a recommendation to develop something called school complex or cluster. A digital platform will be set up. It will be called Diksha, Digital Infrastructure and Knowledge Sharing Platform, wherein high quality learning material will be posted. So anyone who teacher or student wants to access high quality learning material online, they can do so. There will be something called Parakh, Performance Assessment Review and Planning, Assessment of Knowledge. So this will also be, there will be a kind of setup for performance assessment for teachers. And this will be done by the SCR team. There will be National Testing Agency. And the idea is also it should not happen just once in a year, but at least twice in a year. Department of School Education now will be responsible for only monitoring and policy making instead of doing multiple things. So there is also kind of bifurcation of specialized activity from policy making to funding to accreditation to assessment and all of that. State School Standard Authority will be established to make sure there is a minimum standard being followed by all the educational institutions. Now, SCRT will develop framework for this. About teacher education, the idea is that there will be a new curriculum framework for teachers education, and that should come in 2021 itself. So the year we are going to enter, this new curriculum should be introduced for teachers education. The idea is also by 2030, there should be only 4-year integrated B.Ed instead of 2 years B.Ed, and that too, which happens after graduation. Now, after 10+2 only, all the aspirants should be able to do B.Ed and get into teaching profession. Teacher eligibility test, which is being done, will be further strengthened, and technology will be used to find out where are the gaps in terms of recruitment, deployment, assessment, in which school there is lack of math teacher, or where we have enough capacity of teachers and all that. National professional standards for teacher will be set up, and this by 2022. So there are like smart goals and targets. Teacher transfer also to be reduced. So we know this is one part of a big problem. So it will only be now done as an exceptional practice and nothing more. This national education policy is a huge document. There are multiple recommendations. What I have listed here is just wanted to give the context for our audience, that this is the context in which today's thematic webinar is focused. So now what we'll do is we'll get to the first speaker for the day. And in this case, let me invite Dr. Rita Sonawat to be the first speaker for this webinar. And well, Rita ji is free to talk about everything under this broader context that I have set up, but her specialization, and we would love to know more and more from her about early childhood education. So Dr. Rita ji, please unmute yourself, and program flow would be something like this, that each speaker gets roughly 8 to 10 minutes to present, so that we could save some time at the end for question and answer, and we should be done with this webinar by 12:30. So Rita ji, please.
Thank you so much, Amit, for setting the stage. And thank you so much, Deepak, for introducing me. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, all the participants and panelists. It's a wonderful, I think, theme which is chosen by NISA. And I'll be focusing definitely more on early childhood education. So all of us, we know very well that national education policy has come with a lot of promises. It is forward-looking and long-term vision, and preparing vibrant citizens for our country. So it's a definitely paradigm shift for the early education, because more of the responsibility has come on the early education. Major chunk, 5 years have gone on the foundation years. There are many positives in the policy, which include like early childhood education has shifted to education department. But still there is a challenge that this ICD, because of the ICDS program, which is a major program in early childhood education. So how education department and WCD is going to manage these two? So if it is both of them they're managing, then how they will be doing, unless it is mentioned very clearly. Otherwise, the same thing will happen, and it is not good for the education of the young children. 360-degree assessment, which Amit has talked about. In early years, we used to do all the domains of development and measuring the children in the development. So that kind of assessment was always part of the early years program, and that is what is mentioned here. So I'm very happy about it, and we'll be continuing with the 360-degree of assessment also. So that way, I can say it's really a good move. But however, what we need to understand here is we need to pay attention to the implementation of some of these proposals, and how they will be implementing, which is suiting to the primary also, first and second standard. So continuum of education from pre-primary to primary, not in curriculum only, but in the knowledge space also. Because most of the time when the attached schools are there, the primary always used to blame the pre-primary. You are not teaching anything, the children are not knowing anything. Now when we are saying there is a continuum in first and second standard, so for that continuum, the framework should be very strong and solid. Unless it is come from NCERT, there will be definitely, again, the same problem we will be facing. So I really want NCERT to get a support from professionals from all over India and make a very strong continuum curriculum framework for the foundation years. The challenge which I think so we are facing in early years or foundation years, I can say, we have a very less understanding of children's, their needs, their development, and even their priorities also. because we have an inadequate funding for the research and development. So this area is all the time we are looking for the books from other countries or research from the other countries. And since it is a very contextual developmental domain, so it's not very good to measure our children or assess our children from the context of the child development, which is coming from other countries. So we need to really do something for this area, where when we talk about child development and curriculum making, and for the curriculum making, the basis of the curriculum is development. So we need to have a better understanding of the child development. And when it comes to the even education of where the state government is responsible, maybe it's a SCERT, diet, or even NGOs. NGOs have a poor funding, so they can contribute limited. But SCERT and diet, if you see their contribution in early years, then monitoring and evaluation, even in the training part, I don't think so in early years, that kind of competencies most of the trainers have. So when the training is weak, the impact of that is seen on a teacher, and the further impact is in their delivery in a preschool. So I'm really worried about our Anganwadi workers and our Balwadi workers. So that from that understanding, I'll say NEP has given emphasis on a conceptual understanding against the rote learning. But do we know that our teachers, they understand what comes in a conceptual understanding? Because I have seen many of the, even private school for that matter, all children are singing, London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. They don't know where is the London, what is the bridge, and where it is falling down. But the simple rhymes like we have dhobi aya, kitne kapde laye, that kind of thing, if we are promoting in our preschools, I think so that contextual curriculum will make more sense for the child's development rather than what we are teaching right now. And then we are talking about competencies. So what exactly competencies we are thinking the preschool should be having? And these competencies where we are talking about communication skills, collaborative, cooperation, decision making, all these skills, even critical thinking, higher order of thinking. Children can have higher order of thinking. But unfortunately, what is the sad thing is, are we trained enough to conduct the activity, plan the activity, so children's this higher order of thinking will come out. So there again, the challenge is definitely teacher and teacher training. So it is percolating in a teaching in the classroom. We have very nicely in a NEP. We have seen for the B.Ed, 4 years of B.Ed and 3 years is a degree and 1 year is a pedagogy, and pedagogy training will be going continuously. So this is very good for the middle school and a higher elementary school. But what about the preschool? Preschool, the qualification which is laid, Anganwadi workers kept in mind, and the training is very limited. So again, I have a worry that we should not be on the same position, because B.Ed is not a qualification to teach in early years. We all know ECCED is the qualification. So how many institutions are giving ECCED? How many universities are giving ECCED? And whatever the program they are running, are they, is government is knowing that these are the institutions which are running the teacher training program? University has a mandate to give a diploma or a degree. But I have seen even the private players are also giving the diplomas. So do we have any mechanism where we know how many preschools are there, how many teacher training institutions are there, what is their quality, and what kind of program they are giving? So that is definitely a challenge which we are having in front of us. And when we talk about even competency-based curriculum, there the assessment should go hands in hand. So we need to now measure the competencies. Earlier, we used to measure the developmental aspect of the children. So this shift which has taken place because of the NEP. So when we are giving all these competencies, so we need to learn according to the competency, give the activities and assessing the activities. So otherwise, what will happen? We will be not making a major shift, which is required as a NEP document. And last thing which I want to say is a continuous professional development. I will be very happy if we have a continuous professional development, and from the pre-primary training, they are training themselves in service and reaching to the primary, to the secondary, to the university. This kind of professional development, if it is taking place, and with that profession, the candidate is reaching to the teaching to the even college level, I will be very happy. But promotion should be definitely according to the competencies which they are gaining. And if they are gaining competencies, then what is the harm if they are teaching on a higher level also? Because this is another stigma. In early years, you don't have to know much. You just have to know just alphabets and numbers, and it is done. Anybody can teach. No, it's not anybody's job. It's a profession, and the teachers, those who are teaching in the early years, they are also professionals. So for us, it is very important that we need to recruit teachers the way it is recruited in other state, other areas of teaching. So I personally want TET, which is there for the other teachers, the similar way. For the early years also, we should be having TET. And then if we are employing the teachers, maybe they will be doing justice. And similarly, the way we have a BA program, 3 year plus 1 year, same way, if we have, which is NEP is not talking about, but if the government is implementing the program and government think about it, similar pattern, if we have a 4 years of ECC Ed, then only I can say we will do justice with the foundation years and justice with the first and second standard, which has come to the foundation years, because in global practice, in a preschool, 1, 2, 3 years plus 2 years, 1 and 2, they are coming in a early childhood education sector. So early childhood education sector need to be very powerful, from a degree level to the diploma level to the certificate, and certificate, which is the professional development, has to be enhanced. So thank you so much. I have taken my 10 minutes time. If there is any question, I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Rita ji. And I really loved it when I saw that you are keeping a tag on the time. That is what I get worried about. Anyway, so if I briefly summarize, I think you have given a wonderful start for this webinar, because the kind of point you covered gels with the other speakers also that we have. So the first and foremost concern comes as a flow of education right from pre-primary to primary, and whether all of those are in sync with each other or not. I think this challenge that you have identified as to collaboration of education ministry with WCD, Women and Child Development Ministry, is very important, because so far the idea is, how do we convert Anganwadis as a pre-primary schools education center, and where the provision that NEP is recommending is just a 6 months training to the existing ASHA workers, who so far are recruited and trained for some other purpose. So would they be able to deliver? And if we have to do with that kind of manpower, what kind of training and education is required? You talked about that it needs to be that all the stakeholders, and specifically in the curriculum design, training, performance assessment, they all come together, like SCRT, DIET, NGOs, and many private players also these days have come into the teacher training, assessment, performance management component. So how the policy should create a framework where all of them are able to work and contribute and scale up to their achievements. How do we set that contextual curriculum to get rid of the rote learning? Because rote learning is one major problem that we have. And I think contextual curriculum is one important thing to focus on. Then the practical challenges. How many number of institutions do we have? How many pre-primary school teachers that we have? How many institutes we have? Would they be able to train and deliver the number of human capital required to do those things? So it's just a practical challenge, and all of those need to be thought through. And then you talked about continuous professional development, etc., which I think sets the right context, because this is what I think the key skill for next of our two speakers. So Dr. A. Senthil Kumar, who has actually focused on the same thing, the teacher education, competency, performance, assessment, all of that. And further taking to scaling it up, that is what is the core thing of Dr. Abhinav Mathur. I'm so happy kind of you did my job as well. So setting up the right context. Anyway, now let me move to Dr. A. Senthil Kumaran to continue this discussion, talking, as I said, mostly focus on the current teacher education, the competency that we have, how the assessment could be done, the performance could be managed, etc. Continuing the discussion. So Dr. Senthil Kumar, all up to you.
Namaste to all the co-panelists who have joined me today. And I think it's good to be back with the co-learners, because I think all of us are learning every day. And it is also interesting that we are celebrating. What kind of celebration is a celebration of new education policy coming in? But actually, if I try to look at this whole new education policy, it is a continuum. It is a continuum of certain things what has not worked in the past. जो पहले ठीक नहीं था, अब कैसे ठीक कर सकते हैं, उसको accelerate कैसे कर. I think this is something which people really need to understand this, because this is a myth which I find whenever I've been going to all the sessions and talking to people. Everybody has this fear, oh, there is something new, there is something new. There's nothing new, but it is, if you try to understand the history, people are getting stuck to those 72 pages. I think we really need to look at इससे पहले जितने भी commission निकले थे, उन commissions की क्या learnings थी and how exactly this has been done. So we really need to look at what has happened in the past and what's happening across the world. Because when I got the first time that 400 plus pages, I think it was very, very important. It was very, very important for all of us to look what the whole world is doing. And that way, when I'm trying to look at the policy, the whole policy, and particularly with the teacher section, I think it is amazing. So I would like to divide my session into why and what needs to be done with regard to the new education policy and what is some of my thoughts with regard to that. First and foremost thing is that when I try to look at this particular policy, I consider this as a very, very aspirational. Why I consider this as a very, very aspirational? India, which is known in the past for that guru who used to kind of decide कि ये बच्चा ये काम करेगा और ये बच्चा ये course करेगा. I think this particular policy is moving towards that direction, because it is talking about grade 3, 5, and 8. When it is talking about branching out, I think this orientation itself is required first for our own teachers. Because our teachers have started thinking already that up say 5 board examination honge, that kind of a mindset has come up. So we really need to understand this particular perspective कि हमारा past, हमारा जो इतिहास है, from that, what is that key learning we are getting when it comes to teacher? So first and the foremost thing is that teacher, that guru who was in the past, and when this whole policy is talking about contextualization, I think it is good for us to go back and reflect from our history. When we were talking about the 25 years, कि एक बच्चा 25 years तक शिक्षा प्राप्त करेगा, skill develop करेगा, idea develop करेगा, and then ये बोलेगा कि okay, you can go and start doing archery. You can do this particular aspect. And then exposing them to all the practices what is required. And when we went to rest of the world, we have forgotten. When we went to rest of the world, whether it was Singapore or Finland, I think these practices were done in form of CCE, not continuous comprehensive evaluation. It is all about making sure that character and citizenship education when it came to Singapore. When you go to another part of the world and you try to look at the teacher there, I think you really need to look from that particular perspective. They talked about home economics, which was part of our Gurukul system. So probably we really need to understand and give a right orientation to our own teachers कि हमारे इतिहास में क्या था and what are the practices which are being done. Now coming to my second point, I think which is the most important reason that why somebody wants to become a teacher or somebody doesn't want to become a teacher. I think हमारे इतिहास में there has been something called as the conflict which always happens is जहाँ भी लक्ष्मी होती है वहाँ सरस्वती नहीं होती, जहाँ सरस्वती होती है वहाँ लक्ष्मी नहीं होती. So this conflict of Saraswati and Lakshmi is something which is always disturbing most of the teacher to choose teaching as a profession. And I think this is where my request, to the people, to the policymakers is going to be, I think we really need to balance it out. I don't know how many of you know, even if you try to look at our customs tradition, there is always one Ganesha which is sitting in between to balance between the Lakshmi and Saraswati, just to ensure that ye jada na ho, dono ke beech mein right balance ho. I think this is something which is very, very important for somebody to get into teaching, to become a teacher. To now all after teacher ke baad jitna bhi ye sab English hai mere anusar. Facilitator, these are all, people use certain jargons to make it more, different than what it used to happen in the past. But mere liye a guru hai, and that's where that guru needs right kind of data, right kind of training, right kind of thought process. Now coming to my third point. My third point is, see, this is where I was very, very happy. I was very happy that new education policy for the first time told all of us who are sitting in this forum as professionals. We were called professionals for the first time. It was always other sectors which got the identity. It was for the first time that in a policy, very openly, we are trying to talk about a national professional standard for teachers. I think that is something very beautiful and important. Because this is one question which I have been asking many private schools. I've been working with multiple schools for the last 3 decades, different kinds of school in my multiple avatars, what I have played. But what I have understood is that everywhere we always had one qualification कि आपके पास license है तो आप गाड़ी चला सकते हैं. आपके पास license है तो आप गाड़ी चला. That means you have a B.Ed, so you can go into a classroom. And that was considered as one of the last resort for people to come in. I think this is where I appreciate that first time we are talking about a national, professional standards for teachers. Now, if this comes in, I think Dr. Rita basically talked very beautifully about the examination and assessment process. The examination is okay, part of it, when people will get into, but are you really passionate to get into this particular profile? And this is where I have, again, my next point, which I'm trying to, building on that particular professional standard, is that today a PhD doesn't want to go and teach in a kindergarten or a early years program. He or she doesn't want to go because he thinks कि मैंने PhD लिया है and I need to go to the university only, not anywhere, which is a challenge again. So we really need to understand this particular perspective. Qualification is not directly proportional to whatever job that you are going to get. Qualification is minimum requirement. It is only a minimum requirement which you really need to move towards that. Now coming to the one of the very important things which has been talked about is competency-based education. We are telling children about the competency-based education. I would really like to see that if NEP is getting implemented in the total letter, spirit, whatever we are trying to talk about, I think we really need competencies to be defined very clearly in 3 different parameters when it comes to teachers. One is the domain, the subject. First, whether I know the subject, whether I know how to deliver this particular subject, how to contextualize this particular subject. And I'm sure a lot of history teachers are going to get into trouble when the student is going to ask कि Bangalore का इतिहास आप बताओ, and NEP is talking about 40% of history. I don't know how many people will even know. I'm right now coming from Bangalore. How many people will know कि Bangalore नाम कैसे पड़ा Bangalore? I think many teachers will not be able to know. And I think we really need to understand that this is the beauty of NEP, that it is trying to talk about 40% of localization and teacher subject विषय का जो ज्ञान है, विषय को deliver करने का जो बात है, I think that is something very, very important. The second important thing is that, which is this NEP, which in a teacher competency, which I think is the role, the avatar what the teacher plays. He or she joins as a teacher, he or she becomes a class teacher, he or she becomes a coordinator, he or she becomes a vice principal or principal. But it's a different avatar ke liye, is there some kind of a training which has been provided? I am not sure about it. At least for the first time, we are talking about in NEP, modular training programs. Modular training programs which needs to be put together. And I'm sure that all this will be mapped on a competency framework. And the last important thing, which is a challenge for us, today why we are getting, if a guru ne ek baat bol diya, then there is no more questions asked on it. And that's where I think the behavior comes in. Because I think this is where the third important competency which a teacher requires, I think really needs to be touched. And I'm sure the NCRT in their earlier document in Pindais has made a certain mentions about the performance. Because today we never had a performance management, performance stand, what you'll call teacher competencies been defined. Then how we were doing recruitment, I was not sure about it. Appraisal के नाम पे हर साल झूठ बोला जा रहा था. Retirement के time पे department को develop करने के लिए, did we have a matrix to basically work on it? I'm not very sure about it. And this is where what is my request is the comprehensive framework must talk about the performance, the standards for each of these roles. Suppose if I'm a teacher, what avatar I'm supposed to play and how I'm supposed to behave. If I am a class teacher, how I'm supposed to be there. And it should not become another TV serial where there is one, Bahu and Saas kind of episode, which keeps happening, even in schools with the old timers and the newcomers. And I think this is where we really need to understand. The old people think that they are the ambassadors of that particular institution, but they also needed to understand that there is something called as freshness, which is very, very important when it comes to quality and when it comes to teacher quality as such. What happened when COVID came? What happened when COVID came? Most of the so-called superheroes of the campus suddenly became blank because they were not well versed with the technology or technology adoption. You saw a new breed of heroines coming into the school sector. These young people who are very tech savvy, they did the job what others were not able to do. I still believe जो भी आज technology है, it is not a technology, it is still a panicogy. मेरे अनुसार, it is only a panicogy. It is not a technology adoption. In panic में जब हमें को मारने आता तो हम हाथ पांव जो भी मार के करते हैं ना, that kind of a thing we did actually when it came to technology. So we really need to look at it. The competency framework is very, very important, and then we can do it. Because we are not, I don't want to take any historian's name, where सबका गला काट के सारे teachers को खत्म करके we cannot import a new set of teachers. We have to nurture teachers. We have to segment teachers, because the teachers are also at 3 levels. One level who are already passionate and they will do, whether you give them recognition, whether you give them anything, they will continue to learn and they will do. That is one breed of people. There is one more set of people who are knowing, but they are not motivated enough. They are not motivated enough to take certain tasks. And there is third set of people, aap kuch bhi kar lo, maine nahi badalna. Aap kuch bhi kar lo, I'm not going to change myself, and that is the segment. So my suggestion, in NEP is that how do you, because that is where the behavioral aspects will come in. Behavioral trainings will come in, because there is no behavioral training which has been provided. Most of us, we talk about teacher. I think we really need to kind of go and reinvent ourselves when it comes to this particular part. When a teacher comes into the institution, there is a process of baptizing this particular person. एक नई बहू आती है, तो he or she has to go through to understand the cultural context, and that's where I think when we look at the rest of the world, there is something called as an induction kind of a program, which I don't think it happens in many of the institutions. Even if it has happened, it is like a big Kumbh Mela where there are hundreds of people sitting there. Somebody is listening, somebody is not listening, and I think we really need to be very, very cautious about this particular part of it. What I loved in this particular policy is that branching out. Most of my training program I've been talking, you want to kill a teacher, make him principal. अपने आप टीचर खत्म हो जाएगा उसके अंदर. The teacher in him or her will get killed. Nobody is required to kill him or her. This particular policy tells you that you are not you think that you want to go and branch out and become principal. I think that's where the academic and administration route is very beautifully done. But I hope the details will follow it, because the devil is purely in details, and if the details, whoever is working on it, my suggestion is going to be कि आप किस ढंग से वो टीचर ही रहना चाहता है जिंदगी भर, तो टीचर ही रहने दीजिए. यदि वो टीचर एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में जाना चाहता है, तो I think after 10 years, 7 years, 10 years, he should know the nuances of it. Otherwise, what exactly is happening in most of the schools is the administration doesn't understand what the teacher needs are. The teacher doesn't understand what administrative challenges are. So they think that they are two different opponent parties. They don't even get along. So that's where I think it's a worthwhile exercise that we really need to look at it. And today, I can tell you, it's a beautiful era that we are going through. Lot of other sector people are coming into education, which is a good thing. But my request to all of them is that understand the terrain and contextualize rather than trying to do things. When a company like McD is trying to make a aloo tikki for India or a paneer something for India, I think we really need to also contextualize the technology and make it accessible and available. First it's available and then make it accessible. I think these are the two things which are very, very important when it comes to teacher. The second last point for me before I close, because I know that I've already exceeded time. I think when people are talking too much around right now on a word called as MSP, 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 I think we also require something called as minimum teachers pay, irrespective of government, private, budget, international, whatever the school is. We really require something called as a minimum teacher salary. Then only we will be very, very happy to retain. I think COVID has really brought out quite a lot of gaps in the system where teachers had to leave their jobs and get into fruit selling, vegetable selling, Maggie selling. It can be anything else. I think this is something very, very important. So teachers also, see, they had that skill. So that's why they quickly adopted to that new thing and went into that. But maybe if there was something called as a minimum teacher salary, I think it is going to be very, very important. My request to all the co-learners who are here, I know that many of the owners are here. My request to you is that you don't require a huge salary jumps when it comes to performance and post-performance. A simple handwritten letter to your staff itself will make the difference. It is not only always financials, but if there is a minimum which has been promised, please adhere to that. And with that particular note, I would be more than happy to take the questions. But my last part is that NEP is very, very aspirational. Teaching also should become aspirational. And who really want to become teachers, please join our community, our tribe. Let's not try to consider this as the kahin kuch nahi mila. Let's come to teaching. With that note, thanks, Amit. And thank you for the opportunity to share. I'll take up the questions later.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Senthilji. I think you brought on several points, which I had also not thought from those perspectives. So I'm really glad that you are here to enlighten us with your ideas, and that comes with a very rich experience. Just making a poor attempt to summarize everything that you talked about is basically one of this idea of NEP. It's kind of is getting more focus on specialization, and therefore not everyone has to kind of think of like 10+2 kiya, then graduation kiya, master's kiya, PhD kiya, academic. This is how academic progression happens apart from the tech, IIT, etc., etc. So more specialization and therefore bifurcation right from the middle to senior secondary and senior secondary education. You brought out this point very beautifully about how do we balance this Lakshmi and Saraswati thing, right? And I had also never thought of like there is something called Ganesha who can play that facilitating role and balancing it out. And we need to find that Ganesha so that there is balance and there is a prosperity. So you get best of both worlds. So all the educators here in our audience, I think this is coming, should be very straight and relevant to them. At the same time, yes, qualification, very important, but qualification should not become like hurdle towards teaching, and most importantly should not become like a licensing, that until you have this license to do, you cannot do. And then also how do we bring all this is to be addressed as a mental framework also, that PhD holders could go and teach in universities but cannot teach in, let's say, primary level or pre-primary level. But at the same time, how do we bring more talent who are kind of interested in the segment, who has the knowledge and would be able to impart education? This point of 40% localization of the content, this is going to be a very, I think, challenging in terms of training and developing that human capital, because in this case, you require furthermore contextualized curriculum, training, assessment, and all of that, which certainly in principal framework, we find that the more and more personalized, customized, contextualized education we can provide is certainly a lot better. But how do we march forward on that path is going to be a challenging, and how do we do that? the competency framework you talked about, and also the comprehensive framework for performance management, so that a teacher also knows what is his next step or next future and what he should be preparing himself for in the future. And I also love this thing that currently we are not actually forget integrating, adopting technology. It's just panicology. In the panic, because there is no alternative, we are trying to find whatever the most appropriate available. But we need to further think through it as what kind of education we are integrating, to what extent that is suitable, how do we implement it, all of that, the range of thinking. And finally, certainly minimum teachers pay thing that you talked about. But overall, I think if I could take one thing as from your the entire 10 minutes talk, is how do we reinvent the human capital which is required to implement. So let's say we talked about all these big ideas in education policy, and that too at the beginning you said that don't look at it as just one policy document, look into the context of the previous policies that also we have. And thereafter, if we, what are the key learnings from the previous policies or previous rules and laws that we have created? And are we learning from that captured learning and implementing and integrating? And therefore, how do we reinvent the entire human capital required to implement the NEP? And which I think is a good question to bring Dr. Abhinav Mathur here, because with his Million Sparks Foundation, and so far as much I have got to know of their work and the training, that is what I liked about it. It's a continuous process. Otherwise, we see that training is ek baar de diya, ho gaya bhaiya, hum train to ho chuke hain, license mil gaya hai. But no, it is required continuously and on the need basis. Abhi aaj mujhe padhana hai, aaj mujhe wo content material chahiye jo mujhe 2 saal pehle diya tha. Where do I find that? Anyways, so Dr. Abhinav Mathur, most welcome. I think the context is right. Specifically, love to have your ideas when your specialization comes to the teacher training, the quality, the reforms proposed, and reforms as practically you see, and how all of these could finally be scaled up. Because currently we have roughly 1 crore teachers, and with the pre-primary added, maybe we would require, let's say, how many? Let's say at least 10, 20 lakhs further more teachers and all. So right. Are we equipped to do it, and how we can tackle this challenge? Sir, Dr. Abhinav Mathur, all to you for your 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Amit. Thank you for reducing the time from 10 to 8 minutes. Thank you very much to have, for you to having me there. It's a great pleasure on a Sunday morning to be able to have such a conversation. It's a very, very enriching conversation. There was so much to learn from whatever Dr. Rita and Dr. Senthil have shared. And I'm looking forward to what my other co-panelists are going to say. So when I'm looking at it, when I look at the new education policy, like Dr. Senthil said, it is highly aspirational and very exhaustive. Now, when I look at it from a teacher's lens, and if I look at my own challenges, that's a different ballgame altogether. Just to very quickly summarize about what we do. So we look at not just continuous professional development, but we look at lifelong learning of teachers. And given the kind of inputs that teachers have to provide to children, it's not going to happen by just, having a training or 10 trainings also given. It has to be a process. It has to be instilled in the life experiences of a teacher itself. That is very, very important. That's how we view it. Now, before I dive into the scaling aspect of it, I would like to maybe share a few things. So when I look at the sustainable development goals, right, that says you should have equitable and inclusive education for everybody and lifelong learning for everybody. But if you look at a teacher, right, and you spoke about 10 million teachers in this country, is there lifelong learning opportunities for the teacher? If the teacher is not learning lifelong, do you really believe that the teacher will be able to instill those values in a child, will be able to keep pace with the world? And I love to say this, and I want to say this to everyone that I meet, that if you look at education, a child getting born today is going to get into the workforce in 2045. It is 2020. We are saying 25 years of education. The child is going to go into the workforce in 2045. If you look at people hiring, if I look at hiring even a driver or a support staff for myself, I look at beyond just literacy numeracy, and I look at so many skills in that person itself. So the simplest skill would be, can my driver have a Google map on his phone? Can I give him an address? Can he feed that address and follow the instruction and reach a particular place? And can I give him money and he can make a transaction without, sort of losing the money or whatever? So there are financial skills, there are life skills which are very, very important today. And we are talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about automation, we are talking about so many things which are going to come into play. And in 2045, the workforce will look very, very different. And in fact, Yuval Nova or Alvin Toffler, they very, very clearly said that the future lies is not for a person who can learn, but it's for people who can learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? And the similar thing is for the teacher. So the new education policy talks about equitable, talks about fundamental rights, duties, constitutional values to be conveyed, talks about skills, values, human rights, sustainable development goals, and living, making a child a global citizen, providing views of the unique capabilities of every children, community participation, ensuring conceptual understanding. There are so many buzzwords over there. But if I am a teacher, and we work with 6 lakh teachers on our platform, so we have 6 lakh teachers who come and learn. So we know what the teacher is thinking, what the teacher is searching for, what the teacher is wanting to know on a daily basis. Now, when I view it from a teacher's perspective, these many buzzwords, the first thing that comes to my mind, I don't even know half of this. I have not embodied all of this. So how can I possibly be translating this in the classroom? So there are lots of challenges over there. And, my own view is, it's not just about those 10,000, 5,000, 60,000 teachers. It's about the 10 million teachers. Because if you really want to provide equitable education, right, it's not going to happen by providing content on Diksha and a student can access it. It's impossible. The last 1 year, if it has shown anything, it has shown us that there is a lot of limitations which are there in online platforms when you view it from a child's perspective. Because finally, the child is curious. The child wants to learn, but the child does not want to get educated, right? So I don't know whether you understand, I'm sure, given this August gathering, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, but it is we who want the child to educate himself. It is the society which wants the child to educate himself. The child wants to play, the child wants to learn, the child is curious, automatically curious. And the teacher has to be enabled to be actually able to spur that and to be able to bring the child into that learning fold. And it's not an easy thing at all. Dr. Senthil said that PhDs, or, Dr. Rita, Sonawat also said that PhDs do not want to teach, the early grades. I believe they are not wanting to teach those early grades, but because it's very difficult, not because they don't want to. It is one of the toughest jobs you can possibly have, because, at the end of the day, the responsibility that you have is that there could be a prime minister, or there could be a president, or there could be a leader sitting in your classroom. And you have to bring out that capability of that child so that the child can achieve the potential that the child has, because everybody is born with the same potential. I was listening to Kamala Harris speak the other day. She said, my first classroom class teacher came to my swearing in ceremony when, she became a senator or something like that. And she said, in my classroom, in my first grade, there were 22 students. This teacher used to teach us, and there were 2 teacher aides. In our country, we don't provide that kind of a support to the teacher. I think one of the things which has gotten lost is that the motivation of the teacher is getting away, because we are looking at it from a human resources standpoint. This is a resource, there is a qualification, and the teacher has to deliver. It's not about that. One word which, sort of struck my imagination when Dr. Senthil said was that passion to teach. That passion, first of all, has to be revived in the teacher. Only can the teacher then deliver the kind of citizen, the kind of, people that we want to have. You talked about India becoming the knowledge center, Amit. How will we become a knowledge center if the teacher is not passionate about delivering that knowledge and creating that passion amongst those children, right? That has to be done. So not only skills, but motivation, the incentive, the respect that the teachers should be given. So we, in my personal view, the national education policy should not just make demands of teachers, but should also write what is it that it is willing to give to the teacher? And in fact, we should ask maybe 100 or 1,000 teachers with regards to, okay, this is what you need to deliver. This is what the nation expects. What is it that you expect from the nation, from the department, from the society? What do you expect from us to deliver to you? Because it's a very, very difficult job, and it's only becoming difficult as we look at the number of skills which has to be required, because finally the teacher is also an output of our education system. And therefore, I mean, I'm not making a judgment here, but there are flaws in teachers as well, because finally this is the education system which has delivered the teacher. So in my view, what is required to do it at scale is to provide a online platform which provides them an opportunity to learn lifelong. And it's not just about, if you're a maths teacher, you should learn only maths. If you're a physics teacher, you should learn only physics. So on our platform, we see teachers wanting to learn English. If you're a physics teachers want to learn maths teachers wanting to learn English and maths. So sorry, and physics as well. So that kind of a cross pollination should be there. And not only that, but even sustainable development goals, right? We have seen the impact that the human beings have had on this world, right? In 15 days of the lockdown, Earth had cleansed itself, right? We were breathing fresh air and all that stuff. And my own view is that unless and until every single teacher is equipped to explain to every single child, as to what that child's role is, what that child's family's role is, what that child's community's role is in solving these sustainable development goals and solving air pollution and solving e-waste, we will never be able to have a sustainable world. So there are larger things at play over here. And that would be possible only we provide lifelong learning. It is in a form which is very, very simple. It is easy for the teacher to consume, and that's been our goal altogether. I think one of the things that we do, and we pride ourselves in the work that we have done, is that the user experience is extremely, extremely seamless. And we absolutely do not shy away from reaching out to the best in the world to help us. So Google has put in a couple of resources to help us. Paytm has put in a couple of resources to help us. There are 4 or 5 organizations who are helping us improve our experience, improve the way the content is structured, and so on and so forth. And I believe that the role of the teacher has to be augmented by supporting and providing content and services to parents. I believe that every parent should be given at least a 2-week course on what is that child going to learn, how that child is going to learn, what will be his journey for the next 16 years. Imagine we charge our parents throughout their lives, right, for 20 years odd, for helping the child learn, and the parent has no clue as to how can he support. And there is a huge support which the parent has to be providing, because a teacher alone will not be able to do it. Like I said, the example of Kamala Harris, 22 children in a classroom and 2 teacher aides and a fully qualified teacher, and the teacher aides were also qualified people, right? That is the kind of thing that we have to provide. So for example, we look at Finland as an example of great education. And I was meeting a minister of education at Finland, and I was saying, you guys have a great thing and stuff like that. So he said, we have literally like 1 teacher to 4 to 5 children. We admire what you are able to achieve in India, because you guys are able to teach 70 children in a classroom, which has, 3 different grades and 3 different levels for every single grade. So, you are teaching literally 9 different kinds of people in a single classroom with a single teacher, with like 90 people over there. So there are, 10 of each type of children in your classroom, and you're able to do it, right? So that's what he said. So we need to provide that support to the teacher. We need to provide mechanisms by which the parent and the community and volunteers can provide, sort of support to the teacher. One of the things which I've seen, and, being a not-for-profit organization, philanthropy does not understand it. They're happier giving a tablet to a child, which the child will break or play games on, rather than support a teacher. Because I personally believe that the single most important determinant for ensuring good life and learning outcomes of students is a teacher. And that is irreplaceable. That is my message, and that's where I would like to stop. And thank you so much once again for the opportunity. Would love to take any questions subsequently, and whenever you open the floor for questions. Sure. And look forward to listening to the rest of the panelists. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Abhinav Mathur. I think it was very enlightening experience to listen to you because you brought on uh, quite a bit of practical learning beyond policy too. And this is one thing that, in fact, I have also been talking that, okay, all the changes which is going to happen in society and also in education, we have to think in context. Policy is certainly one aspect of it, but in my opinion, there are two things which are going to determine the bigger changes in days to come. One will be technology, second will be market. And if we are not adhere to these two important factors, I'm also afraid at the same time, sorry, let me be a little bit pessimistic as well. I am afraid that policy document may not be much relevant in that sense. But anyways, once again, let me make a poor attempt to summarize everything that you talked about. And the first foremost I like is the lifelong learning for teachers. So when we are thinking about how do we create the lifelong learners, but if our teachers are not the learners and we go with this mindset कि भाई मैं तो सबको जानता हूँ, मैं तो teacher मैं पढ़ाने आया हूँ, सीखने नहीं आया हूँ, like, you know, and therefore we like when Dr. Senthil Kumar says my co-learner. So I'm also a learner, you know. So always keep that mind until that kind of attitude change happens will be difficult. This is another important aspect to think from, that the kid who is coming in our education system in 2020 is roughly by 2040, 45 is going to get into the workforce. And therefore, could we think of the kind of future we are going to get into? And could we design and redesign the entire education system accordingly? One major aspect of this new education policy, which I think very important, is the foundational literacy and numeracy. And that is where we are going to get the next speaker, Gayatri ji. But also this has to be integrated with life skills, survival skills, right? So literacy and numeracy sikha diya, but is not able to survive in the world practically would be difficult, and that once again will get into the rote learning कि भाई exam pass करने के लिए सीख तो लिया but I am not able to apply that knowledge. And this is, as we are thinking more and more about the future and uncertainty, we do have to have this attitude of learning, unlearning and relearning, otherwise will be going to be difficult. So the new world, it needs brave people also to deal with that uncertainty. And this is another points I really loved, and I keep saying in my policy classes that always think about that it is we want the kid to be educated. It's not that child does not understand the importance of education. Yes, he wants to play, he wants to grow, he wants to curious, he wants to know, but then you have to kind of synchronize your education, your delivery, your content, everything, and create. And that is where I say one thing no other technology platform etc can do is how do we create enlighten that curiosity among the children. So once you have developed that, once you have kindled that spark, then the kid becomes lifelong learner, right? And it's not dependent. When we are thinking about teacher assessment, performance, scaling up, think about their motivation part as well in terms of performance, aid, incentive, etc., etc. Otherwise, we are merely just preaching and not actually being of any help. And I really like this part of bringing user experience. So, teacher education के लिए are we engaging teachers? Kids, बच्चों के education के लिए are we engaging the children? Are we engaging the parents and community? So think from all of that user experience at a receiving end and not as a delivery end. And as we see that NEP is getting focus on interdisciplinary education and multidisciplinary education. So जो हमारे साथ compartmentalization का हो गया था right from the beginning, commerce, arts and segmenting science, all of that. So now I think will be possible to learn physics while you are learning philosophy, and therefore कैसे ये education system को जाना चाहिए. Anyway, once again, from the bigger futuristic points and scaling up and all of those things, let us bring to one major ground level reality. which is when ASER kind of report comes and says, roughly 60% of sixth grade students cannot do basic literacy and numeracy of, let's say, second grade, then everything becomes irrelevant. No amount of money invested, infrastructure created, nothing when it is not delivering. And that is where I want our next speaker, Ms. Gayatri, to focus on, because she brings in a lot of experience from teacher training and specifically with low-cost private schools. So Gayatri, all to you. Please feel free to talk anything and everything within your time frame, but do focus on this, how to tackle this challenge of foundational literacy and numeracy. Please.
Thanks, Amit, for the introduction. And namaskar to all the panelists. It's been great listening to you, Dr. Sonawat, Dr. Mathur. The entire question, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussions. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I just want to jump in and make segue into something that I care about hugely, which is a functional literacy and numeracy, because what we see is bachche school mein aa gaye. Okay, 98%, 99% enrollment has been achieved, but they are not learning to read, not learning to do basic maths. ASER reports are there. No, 72% of the children cannot read grade level text in their own mother tongue or the state language. The mother tongue and the state language is a bit of there's a bit of a complexity there. They are not able to read, or 40% of the children cannot do a subtraction sum in grade 3. 60% cannot do division sum in grade 5. National Assessment Survey also points out that in the last 5 years, the learning outcome levels of at least 19 states out of the 31 states that participated in the survey is constantly falling, right? And we are talking about building skills, we are talking about building this generation for the future. But if we do not equip them with these basics, right, what are we doing is a question that I ask myself. A friend once asked, "Ya tum itne saalon se kar rahe ho kaam, ye kya rocket science hai? Why can't you get children to just read and do basic math?" Right? And I was stumped by that question. And I said, yeah, we are actually sending rocket to the Mars. We have moon rovers and satellites going there. So I don't know ye rocket science hai ya rocket science nahi hai. The question is, how do we sort of solve this problem, right? And given the focus on the policy, which for once actually puts it almost like an urgent goal, that by 2025, we want 100% of the children in grade 3 to achieve their numeracy and literacy goals, right? It's almost like a goalpost put out there. It is like a one-day match कि इतने run बनाने हैं सारे बच्चों को किसी तरीके से grade 3 तक. We have to ensure that they learn to read and do math. One can be pessimistic and say, hey, we haven't done it in the last 20 years. What magic are we going to do in the next 5 years, right? Or we can say, can we actually do this magic in the next 5 years? Maybe it was not all that difficult, right? And I would want to bring out our learnings, working with a lot of affordable private schools, running a lot of programs for teachers, for children, learning while tinkering with the programs as to what works. And what we saw that one of the things I would just like to bring out is there's this problem ki learning nahi ho raha. Now, if we dissect the problem into specific parts, now what we have learned is there are 4 to 5 major components, out of which, for the ease of thing, if we just say there are 4 components. The first is the content itself. Like Dr. Rita said, London Bridge is falling down. Na London malum hai, na bridge ne malum hai, na falling down malum hai, right? Yeah. Also, the contextual kind of content that a child is exposed to in early years, starting from KG to grade 3. Agar hum koi bhi, if you look at any language, take a Kannada book, take Hindi, take Marathi, or जो textbooks English में लिखे जाते हैं. Look at the kind of content that is there. Look at the kind of vocabulary that is there. It is so removed from what children actually talk about or are exposed to. So the way they are not at very early age, by the time the child is 6 or 7, the child begins to feel, I'm listening to something else, but when I am asked to read, मुझे कुछ और दिखाया जाता है. I'm not able to make sense out of the text. Let me give an example. Right, in a Kannada textbook, now when content developers try to design content, what they say is, matra akshar se shuru karenge, decoding of matra akshar, then put words together, then put sentences together. Somewhere making meaning out of this comes very late. By the time they make meaning, they have lost interest in the entire process because it looks daunting. So there's a very good example, I think one of the tests and the Azim to MG surveys have also spoken about it. And anybody who has been in a classroom understands this, right? What is an elephant? Elephant ko Kannada mein bolte hain aane, right? So there was this teacher who was showing the picture of an elephant and say, what is this? Child says, aane, very good, right? And then she looks at what is written in the book. The book says salaga. Now, salaga is another word for tusk wale elephants. Why is salaga been selected as a word? Because it's easy. It is sa, la, ga. इन्हें तो आ में आ का मात्रा भी है, ने में नैन का मात्रा है. बच्चों को भी मात्रा नहीं सिखाया. What word do you select to teach them? I'm just taking this as a complex example. So you suddenly tell the child salaga. The child has heard. So always heard of an elephant being referred to as aane. And the movement from the listening, speaking component to reading, writing component, the gap here is what stops children from really accessing reading for their own fun and joy and to make sense of it. I just took this as an example. And if we take any textbook, LKG, UKG till grade 2, 3, you realize that the words and the vocabulary that we are exposing the children to is so far removed from what they experience in their daily life. So that's one angle when we say the content and the curriculum needs to be relooked, right? And this is where many a times, there are a lot of place, and the question is, can each state look at it separately? The second part is teacher support. Now, what we realized was just great content is not going to do a job in itself. How do you get a teacher to, if she say, for example, it's a new way of teaching, instead of using the word pedagogy or something, it's a new way of teaching or a different way of teaching. Lot of trainings focus on either an activity. Ye activity karo to ye magic ho jayega. Nobody explains to the teacher why has that activity been selected, what purpose will it achieve. So it takes away the agency from her. She just does it and she does not see it working, and she either leaves it. And some teachers, like Dr. Senthil Kumar said, the extremely motivated ones, they always try to find out and they somehow bring the classroom to life. So the question is, how can teachers be supported on a continuous basis? A support that is relevant for the job that they're doing. Look at the way a doctor gets supported with the latest equipments today. Look at the way IT developers get supported with the latest that is happening in the world today, right? How are we going to sort of give a relevant support to the teacher, right? And just not work around saying there is this pedagogy is good, or that pedagogy is good, or this system of learning is good. Finally, who has to learn? The child has to learn. Who is the best person who can help the child do it? The teacher can do it. Can we give them the best tools to be able to do that, right? Rather than just trying to be focused on a particular methodology or a certain way of thinking. The third thing that we saw and we realized was, okay, there is a content that makes sense. There is a continuous teacher support that has to be put in place. You have to still test how the learning is progressing by taking little tests which are not threatening to the child, which are like fun, dipsticks, samples. Use those to see what is working, what is not working, and make changes. And give the agency to the teacher to make those changes. Top down has not worked. Even us working with 100 schools did not work. What we needed to do was give agency to that manager who was dealing with the teachers and to the teacher. Once you've explained the teacher and forced her to explore her own belief systems. अगर आप ये सोचते हो कि बच्चा इसी तरीके से सीखेगा, आप ऐसा क्यों सोचते हो? कहाँ से आया ये thought? Yeah, and can you do it differently? These are the reasons why we think you may want to try it. आप try करके देखिए ना, आप एक हफ्ते try करके देखिए क्या होता है. Get her to document it. And if we have some amount of data support, what we have seen is, what we used to do is, okay, you've used this kind of a methodology. एक महीने बाद we test 10 small sample of children. We share it, and we share it with the teacher very openly. She looks at it and says, I know what made the difference. I tried these two things in the classroom. This seems to be working. She feels encouraged. she feels motivated, she feels enthused. Yeah? Totally agree that teacher salary is a big component, but teacher motivation is also a huge component. Somebody says, yeah, great job done. These 25 children in your class have learned well. So working on those parts is very, very important. And the last and not the least, and which we learned belatedly, especially working with, because we are a not-for-profit working with affordable private schools, we completely forgot about parents, yeah, their belief systems. Yeah, and we realize that unless you bring them on as stakeholder, every parent is investing time and anything from 12 to 20% of their salaries into a child's education through many ways. Formal school में डालते हैं, tuition करवाते हैं, extra चीजें दिलवाते हैं, right? The question is, what value is being delivered, number one. Number two is, what are the parents' beliefs about education, especially in KG to grade 2, grade 3? If they say कि बच्चों का notebook भरा हुआ है with written text, it means learning is happening. That is what parents think is learning. Therefore, it disincentivizes leaders, teachers from trying out other methods. Imagine this. Telling stories to young children is such a powerful way of getting them to learn new vocabulary, getting them to articulate, getting them to think. Parents आके पूछते हैं, I worked in a lot of villages where parents are like, you are charging us money and you are हमको बेवकूफ बना रहे हो, बच्चों को खाली कहानी सुना रहे हो, या जब देखो बच्चे खेल रहे होते हैं, what is this? They're playing with bricks and counting and doing maths. There is no point. It is a process. You have to accept it, not try to push it back. Call them in, conduct orientations, conduct showcases where you're able to see if a child is able to do this. Finally, the child is able to do 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, right? If a child listens to stories, the child is able to connect those. You encourage a child to ask questions in the classroom. Who encourages UKG children? Jo kaha gaya hai, wahi suno. Then we say we want great, citizens for the country. But jab agar jo kaha gaya wahi sunna hai, how can we create the thinking ability in the children? How do we give confidence to them that they can question, they can ask, they can participate in those learnings? And how do we make parents as stakeholders, saying, do not worry, this will get there, this will go there. हमने last 25 साल से एक तरीके से पढ़ाने की कोशिश करी, it has not worked. Can we change it? So those are the 4: the content itself, teacher support, using continuous assessments and data to be able to inform the system, the teachers, parents. The 4th is involving stakeholders. So the question is, how can we do this? 50% of our children, there are 25 odd crore children in schools, out of which I'm told 11.5 to 12 crore children are in primary grades. We have that opportunity. 50% coming June 21, if we want to reach goals in 25, we start in 21 June and put some of these things in place, right? So that ये जो बच्चे हैं, they do not lose out, they do not develop learning gaps as they go ahead. The second thing is, जहाँ gap आ गया है, acknowledge it. There are a lot of bridge programs that different NGOs have tried out, have tested out. It's been documented and it works. Put children through bridge courses. Do not make it look like there is a problem with those children. Just make it look like a game. Children never get demotivated जब वो video game खेलते हैं. उसमें हार गया तो बच्चा कभी ये नहीं सोचता कि I am a failure. जब बच्चा ये सोचता है कि मैं कैसे जुगाड़ लगा के how can I learn to get to the next level? Can we get that attitude and get the children to go through certain bridge programs? That's the second part. And the most important part, which will bring all of these together at state levels, district levels, taluka levels, is how do we monitor? What are the indicators of learning that we select? What does a block level officer, जब वो जाते हैं देखने के लिए कि क्या हो रहा है, what do they look out for? If I'm going to ask a child in front of a teacher, what did Sita tell Gita? Out of a context. So what you're encouraging the teacher to do is learn that story, Sita Gita, memorize it, do not care to understand the context and just answer. So what are the correct indicators of learning, and what are good ways to test for those indicators of learning? We have to ensure that everybody in the system understands, teachers, whether they are in government schools or in affordable private schools, leaders, the governmental officials who go to test these, right? equip them with the why of it, because they have done it very differently for many years. So suddenly changing and thrusting it down will not work, but spending time to get them to see why it needs to be done. I'm certain, and I've seen many officers who, once you have enough conversations and they see the results, at the end of the day, every BEO wants ki mere block mein mere bacche achhe se padhe, right? So incentivize, motivate them, and go out there. And once we set these benchmarks, indicators of learning, the processes which are not interfering, and give the agency to the teacher, trust her. Yeah, 99.99% of the times it will work. And if that happens, I hope I can turn around and tell my friend who asked me this question कि ये rocket science है क्या? मैं कहा पता नहीं rocket science है कि नहीं, लेकिन yes, it is possible to ensure that children achieve this basic grade level proficiencies in time. Yeah. So yeah, over to you, Amit.
Thank you very much, Gayatri. While I take this responsibility that we are messing up with the time a little bit, but the flow was going so well, I really didn't want to kind of stop anyone. But anyway, we'll have to move faster. Giving a just quick summary of everything that you talked about is FLN rocket science, right? We can go to the moon and find water and all of that, और हम अपने बच्चों को basic चीजें क्यों नहीं पढ़ा पा रहे हैं? Gap in the teaching methodology and pedagogy and the content की contextual हम बच्चों को बातें नहीं पढ़ा पा रहे हैं और वो उनके लिए relevant नहीं होता है. And the most important thing, as you emphasize, once the kid loses interest, एक बार उसे लग गया कि भाई ये कुछ ऐसा theoretical चीजें पढ़ा रहे हैं और उसका interest चला गया तो फिर उसको लाना मुश्किल हो जाता है. Continuous and relevant support that we provide to teachers. जहाँ पे मैं सोच रहा था more like a mentoring program. In different segments of our life, we do have mentors. So could we also think like teachers को हम mentoring provide करें क्या, जिसमें कि continuously उनको on demand support मिलता रहे. And then I think once you trust the teachers और वो अलग-अलग intervention कर रहे हैं, so then you identify कि कौन सा वाला intervention का successful हुआ, उसका कैसे impact होता है. And then we create that sharing and learning thing. तो वो then it scales up. तो अच्छी बातें हो जाती हैं. पेरेंट्स पर्सपेक्टिव, हम सबको मालूम है पेरेंट्स को जो अगर जितना ज्यादा से ज्यादा होमवर्क दे रहे हैं, जितना बच्चों को एंगेज करके रख रहे हैं, उतना उन्हें लगता है कि स्कूल अच्छा परफॉर्म कर रहा है, टीचर्स अच्छा परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं. तो उस पे भी काम करने की जरूरत है. आई थिंक दैट इज वेयर डॉक्टर अभिनव माथुर आल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट द एंगेजमेंट ऑफ पेरेंट्स एंड कम्युनिटी एंड द ब्रिज प्रोग्राम. सो वंस वी आइडेंटिफाई असेसमेंट में कि ऐसा हुआ है, ऐसा नहीं हुआ है, क्या इंटरवेंशन हम डालते हैं ताकि वी कुड ब्रिज द लर्निंग गैप. एनीवेज, अब आते हैं अरुणा सारस्वत जी के पास. अरुणा जी, सॉरी, मैं जानबूझ के आपको सबसे लास्ट के लिए रखा था ताकि हम आपके थ्रू जो आपका है सिंस 1982 आप एजुकेशन सेगमेंट में आए पढ़ाने में, और आपका ये लगभग 4 दशक का जो अनुभव है उस पे हम कितना ज्यादा कैपिटलाइज कर सकते हैं. तो मैम आपसे तो आप भी फ्री हैं, जो भी बातें आप बोलना चाहते हैं उसके बारे में, लेकिन फाइनली इन सब चीजों को हम लर्निंग आउटकम में कैसे कन्वर्ट कर पाएंगे, उसमें क्या हमें चैलेंजेस दिखते हैं, उसके लिए क्या पॉसिबल सोल्यूशन कोई हम प्लानिंग कर सकते हैं ताकि हम सक्सेसफुली करें. एंड नाउ हियर आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट, आई एम सॉरी टू माय आवर ऑडियंस जो 400 प्लस लोग हमसे जुड़े हुए हैं, दैट वी आर काइंड ऑफ लिटिल डूइंग बैड इन टर्म्स ऑफ टाइम मैनेजमेंट. तो अभी मैम को सुनेंगे, उसके बाद हम कुछ टाइम जरूर रखेंगे Q&A के लिए. सो 12:30 की जगह ये 1 तक थोड़ा कंटिन्यू हो सकता है. प्लीज मैम सारस्वत जी, अनम्यूट कर लीजिए अपने को. अरुणा जी, आपको हम देख पा रहे हैं, आपका स्क्रीन फ्रीज हो गया. हाँ, लेकिन आवाज आ रही है आपकी.
नमस्कार सभी लोगों को. नमस्कार.
नमस्कार, आवाज आ रही है आपकी.
जी जी. तत्कर्म न बंधाय सा विद्याया विमुक्तये आयासाया परम कर्म अज्ञान्या शिल्प नैपुण्यम. आज जितने भी मेरे अग्रवक्ताओं ने जो भी कुछ कहा है वो नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी को लेकर बहुत सारी बातें बताई है। शिक्षा में संबंधित जितने भी हर्ड आने वाले हैं उनके विषय में भी बताया है। लेकिन मैं जैसा अभी कुछ वक्ताओं ने बहुत अच्छी बात कही है कि हमने अपने इतिहास को भी जानना चाहिए, उसका भी सपोर्ट लेना चाहिए एजुकेशन को लेकर। तो वास्तव में हम सब सौभाग्यशाली हैं कि इस बार ये जो नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 बनी है, ये हमारे देश की चिति के अनुसार है। क्योंकि किसी भी देश की शिक्षा नीति जब तक उसकी चिति के अनुसार नहीं होती है, तब तक जिस प्रकार का विकास हम चाहते हैं वो विकास हो नहीं पाता। और चूंकि हमारे देश की चिति आध्यात्मिक है, पिछले वर्षों में जो कुछ भी हुआ उसमें ये एक बिंदु था जो मिसिंग था हमारी एजुकेशन पॉलिसीज में, और उसी का कारण रहा जो आज हम हमारे देश की शिक्षा का हसर देख रहे हैं। मैं बहुत शीघ्रता से अपनी बात में सब लोगों ने जो कहा है उसी को लेकर चलूंगी। हम हमारे लोगों में साविद्या या विमुक्ति की बात करते हैं, यानी विद्या वही जो मुक्त करे। मुक्त करे तो हमारे आध्यात्मिक दृष्टिकोण से बात करें तो मोक्ष की बात है। लेकिन क्या आज के परिप्रेक्ष्य विद्यार्थियों को मोक्ष की दिशा में हम चर्चा करेंगे? बहुत से लोगों के मन में ये प्रश्न आता है। तो मुक्त करने से मतलब यहाँ केवल मोक्ष नहीं है, हमें बहुत सी बातों से विद्यार्थियों को मुक्त करना है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, स्टूडेंट्स के अंदर एक फियर क्रिएट हो जाता है। फियर कैसा क्रिएट होता है? क्लासरूम में क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछना। क्यों नहीं पूछना? तो उसके कुछ रीजंस हैं। टीचर, उन्होंने क्वेश्चन पूछा, उसको टीचर ने रिजेक्ट कर दिया, एग्रेसिव हो गए टीचर्स, ये मुख्य कारण होता है। दूसरा, अब अलग अलग लेवल को लेकर के हम बात करें तो छोटे बच्चों में ये प्रश्न ना पूछना, टीचर से डरना, ये मुख्य कारण है। लेकिन जैसे जैसे लेवल बढ़ता जाता है वैसे वैसे ये जो फियर है इसका स्वरूप बदलता जाता है। जब हायर एजुकेशन में आ जाते हैं तो उसे एकमात्र डर लगता है कि मेरी आजीविका का क्या होगा। अगर वो किसी डेफिनेट स्ट्रीम में है फिर भी उसे लगता है मुझे कितना बड़ा पैकेज मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा। ये बहुत सारे एस्पेक्ट्स हैं। लेकिन वास्तव में हम शिक्षा को सही रूप में जाने तो मनुष्य के अंदर अंतर्निहित क्षमताओं का प्रकटीकरण शिक्षा है। और शिक्षा आज वर्तमान समय में डिग्री और नौकरी इनसे सीधे जुड़ गई है। यदि हम बहुत थोड़ा पीछे की ओर जाएं और गुरुकुल व्यवस्था विचार करें तो किसी प्रकार की वहां जो शिक्षा होती थी उस समय के जो शिक्षित लोग थे, क्या उनमें किसी प्रकार की कमी थी? नहीं। अगर हम पॉलिटिक्स, इकोनॉमिक्स पर बात करें तो चाणक्य, लेकिन चाणक्य के विषय में जो परिस्थितियां हमारे सामने थी उस समय जान नहीं पाए कि उन्होंने क्या कुछ शिक्षा को इनहेंस करने के लिए किस प्रकार से उन्होंने हम अपग्रेड किया, हमारे नॉलेज को दिया। अब यहाँ आकर समस्या आती है, क्योंकि टाइम का लिमिटेशन है, मैं बहुत ज्यादा उस विषय में नहीं जा पाऊंगी। लेकिन फिर भी ये जो हमारी NEP है, राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति है, इसमें हमसे कुछ अपेक्षाएं हैं। वो अपेक्षा से भी है, पालक से भी है, और यदि हम स्कूल्स की बात करें, प्राइवेट स्कूल्स को ले लें तो उसमें संस्था चालक, ये 3 बिंदु बड़े हैं। लेकिन इसमें हम किस प्रकार की शिक्षा देना चाहते हैं हमें NEP के द्वारा पता लग रहा है। कुछ मुख्य बिंदुओं पर आपसे बात करूंगी। हम चाहते हैं कि विद्यार्थी समस्या को जाने और समस्या के समाधान के विषय में विचार करना प्रारंभ करें। दूसरी बात जो मैं कहना चाहती हूँ कि वो तार्किक रूप से सोचना सीखें, क्यों, कैसे, कब, ये सब बातें उनके मन में आना चाहिए। फिर लेकिन केवल तार्किक रूप से सोचने से काम नहीं चला, रचनात्मक रूप से भी सोचना पड़ेगा, कुछ नया सोचना पड़ेगा, और जो जानकारी उसको मिली है उसको नए रूप में वो कैसे उपयोग कर सकता है। अब यहाँ बहुत सारी बातें मेरे पूर्व वक्ताओं ने टेक्नोलॉजी से संबंधित है, वो सब बातें यहाँ मैं हम सबके सामने रख दी है, उनका रिपीटेशन मैं नहीं चाहूंगी, क्योंकि विवेकानंद ने भी कहा है कि शिक्षक का रोल केवल और केवल मार्गदर्शक का होना चाहिए। और प्राइमरी शिक्षा में तो शिक्षक को केवल एक मूक दर्शक होना चाहिए, जो बच्चे कर रहे हैं उन्हें करने देना चाहिए, लेकिन उनकी जो एक्टिविटीज हैं उन एक्टिविटीज को स्टडी करके और फिर उसकी क्या क्षमता है, उस हर एक विद्यार्थी की क्षमताओं आकलन शिक्षक को करना चाहिए, और उसके बाद जो उसकी है उसको उसी दिशा में आगे बढ़ने के लिए टीचर ने प्रेरित करना चाहिए। दूसरा, हमारी जो शिक्षा हो, हमारी जो शिक्षण पद्धति हो, आज बहुत सारे शब्द हैं, लेकिन शिक्षण पद्धति की हम बात करें तो वो कैसी होना चाहिए? शिक्षार्थी केंद्रित होना चाहिए, विद्यार्थी केंद्रित होना चाहिए। तभी हम ये जो मैंने अभी ऊपर बातें बताई हैं वो सबको इनकलकेट करने के लिए शिक्षक सक्षम हो, और इन सब बातों को समझाने के लिए हमें सबसे क्वालिटी जो टीचर में होना चाहिए वो होना चाहिए संवेदनशील। जब टीचर संवेदनशील होगा तो ही वो विद्यार्थियों के भाव को जान सकेगा। जो सेंटिमेंटल होगा, संवेदना उसके अंदर होगी। मैं एक छोटा सा उदाहरण देकर अपनी बात को यहाँ समझाना चाहूंगी। एक बार एक शिक्षक अपनी क्लास में एक विद्यार्थी के बारे में विचार करते हैं कि ये विद्यार्थी पढ़ता क्यों नहीं है, क्यों क्लास में जो होमवर्क दिया जाता है वो करके नहीं लाता है। बहुत दिनों तक उन्होंने इस पर विचार किया, लेकिन बात कहीं कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रही थी। तो उन्होंने ये ठीक समझा कि मुझे इस बच्चे के घर जाना चाहिए। जब वो उनके घर गए, वहां उन्होंने पता किया तो उन्हें पता लगा कि कुछ समय पूर्व ही उस बच्चे की माँ का देहांत हुआ, और वो बच्चा अपनी माँ से बहुत ज्यादा अटैच्ड था। शिक्षक ने सारी परिस्थितियों को समझा, बाद में उस विद्यार्थी के साथ कोई बात नहीं, होमवर्क नहीं कर लाए, कोई समस्या घर में रही होगी, आओ मेरे साथ बैठो, मैं तुम्हें समझाता हूँ। जब इस प्रकार का व्यवहार शिक्षक ने उस बच्चे के साथ में प्रारंभ किया तो कुछ ही समय में वो बच्चा बहुत अच्छा विद्यार्थी बन गया। एक समय ये आया कि अपने जीवन में जाकर जब वो बहुत बड़ा अधिकारी बना और उसके विवाह की बात हुई, तो उस समय उसने कहा मेरा विवाह तभी होगा जब मेरी वो शिक्षिका मेरे विवाह में शामिल होगी। और जब उस दिन वो टीचर उसके विवाह में गई, आपको आश्चर्य होगा जान करके उस बच्चे ने एक कंगन उनको भेंट किया जो कहीं से टूटा हुआ था, जिसका कलर निकला हुआ था, और उसने कहा कि ये मेरी माँ की धरोहर है, ये मैं किसे भेंट करूं? आपके अलावा कोई भी नहीं है जो इस कंगन का अधिकारी है। आपने ही उस समय मेरे जीवन को परिवर्तित किया। तो मेरा कहना यह है कि यहाँ पर आकर के और संवेदनशीलता की आवश्यकता है। जैसा मेरे पहले वक्ताओं ने कहा भी कि शिक्षक बनते हैं, कहीं कुछ मिला नहीं, शिक्षक बन गए। लेकिन अभी समस्या ये है, क्या हम इतने सारे शिक्षकों को बदल सकते हैं? नहीं। तो जब हम शिक्षकों को बदल नहीं सकते तो उसके लिए हमको कोई नया प्रयास करना, और उस नए प्रयास के लिए हम क्या करें ये विचार करना हमारे लिए आवश्यक है। क्योंकि हम सभी ये चाहते हैं कि शिक्षा गुणवत्तापूर्ण हो, लेकिन उसके लिए जैसा हम जानते हैं कि शिक्षा में शिक्षक, अभिभावक, संस्था चालक, इन तीनों का केंद्र बिंदु विद्यार्थी होता है। इसका अर्थ ये हुआ कि हमको इन तीनों को शिक्षित करना या इन तीनों के प्रबोधन की हमको आवश्यकता है। तो इसलिए भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल में मैं बहुत वर्षों से काम कर रही हूँ और इसी दिशा पर काम कर रही हूँ। तो इसके लिए हम एक सगुणा या जिसे हम कहें इक्विप एजुकेशन क्वालिटी इम्प्रूवमेंट प्रोग्राम, और इस प्रोग्राम के तहत वास्तव में जो NEP के उद्देश्य हैं, उन उद्देश्यों की पूर्ति की दिशा में अभी बहुत से लोगों ने कहा था कि NGOs इन पर काम करते हैं, उनका डॉक्यूमेंटेशन होना चाहिए। मुझे गर्व है ये बात बताते हुए कि ये हमारा जो भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल है, इसने इस विषय पर लंबे समय से काम किया है और इस सब का डॉक्यूमेंटेशन भी किया है। जब हम टीचर्स की बात करते हैं तो उसके लिए हम संस्था चालक जो हैं, क्योंकि हम जानते हैं कि संस्था चालक, शिक्षक और अभिभावक जब तक आपस में कोऑर्डिनेट नहीं करेंगे तब तक विद्यार्थी के विषय में हम वो सब कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे जो हम करना चाहते हैं। विनोबा भावे ने भी कहा था कि एक तरफ से विद्यालय घर में प्रवेश करे तो दूसरी ओर से घर विद्यालय में प्रवेश होना चाहिए, यानी शिक्षक और पालक इन आपस में समन्वय बहुत आवश्यक है। और इसीलिए हम जो इक्विप में करते हैं उसमें हम संस्था चालकों के साथ मिल करके और पाठ्यक्रम, अध्यापन पद्धति की गुणवत्ता की वृद्धि करने का प्रयास करते हैं। उसके लिए हमने 3 एम तय किए हैं। पहला, राष्ट्र निर्माण के लिए व्यक्तित्व निर्माण। अब राष्ट्र निर्माण के लिए हमको व्यक्तित्व निर्माण करना है तो उसके लिए भी कुछ गोल्स रखना पड़ेंगे। पहला है अध्ययन, तो उसमें शैक्षिक उत्कृष्टता, विधि और वैज्ञानिक शिक्षा को स्थान दिया जाना चाहिए। उसके बाद दूसरे पर अगर हम बात करें तो वो है रचनात्मकता। तो रचनात्मकता के लिए हमको संस्था का संस्कारमय वातावरण बनाना होगा, सकारात्मक और सौहार्दपूर्ण व्यवहार बनाना होगा। लेकिन इसके साथ साथ संस्था सामाजिक दायित्व जो है, समाज में उसका योगदान और उसके द्वारा कैसे हम सहभागिता बढ़ा सकते हैं, बहुत उदाहरण है इनके माध्यम से ये बताया जा सकता है कि इन सब को यदि हम प्रारंभ करते हैं तो सरकार की सफलता मिलती है। लेकिन इन सबको अचीव करने के लिए हमको अलग अलग ग्रुप में काम करना पड़ेगा। तो उसके लिए हमने अलग अलग प्रोग्रामिंग किया। पहला है शिक्षक स्वाध्याय। शिक्षक तो अपने आप में गुरु है, वो सिखाने की क्षमता रखता है, लेकिन सामाजिक परिस्थितियां, बहुत सारे कारण है, पारिवारिक है, सामाजिक है, जिनके कारण शिक्षक में जैसा सबका मिला तो शिक्षक बने, लेकिन फिर भी उसमें भी ऐसे शिक्षक हैं जिनके द्वारा पढ़ाए हुए विद्यार्थी ही तो आज मंगल पर मंगलयान भेज रहे हैं, इसरो में काम कर रहे हैं। हमने देखा जो टैलेंट है उसमें से पहली कैडर का टैलेंट तो बाहर चला जाता है, सेकंड कैडर का टैलेंट MNC में काम करना चाहता है, IAS बनना चाहता है। जो फोर्थ कैडर का टैलेंट है, यदि वो मंगलयान को मंगल पर भेज सकता है इसरो में काम करके, तो फिर हमारे यहाँ टैलेंट की कोई कमी नहीं है, शिक्षकों में भी कोई कमी नहीं है। जरूरत केवल उनमें स्व के भाव का जागरण करना है, अभिमान का जागरण करना है। मैं राष्ट्र निर्माता हूँ, वो कुव्वत है, मैं राष्ट्र को विकास के चरम पर पहुंचा सकता हूँ। और का भाव उनमें जगाने के लिए ही हम शिक्षक स्वाध्याय का आयोजन करते हैं। शिक्षक स्वाध्याय के माध्यम से उन्हें अपनी ड्यूटीज को पूर्णता के साथ कैसे पूरा करना, ये हम सिखाने का प्रयास करते हैं। दूसरा, अभिभावक उद्बोधन। आज भौतिक युग में हर एक अभिभावक चाहता है कि मेरा बच्चा बहुत बड़ा पैकेज प्राप्त करे। वो ये नहीं सोचता कि मेरा बच्चा एक अच्छा मानव बने, एक अच्छा व्यक्ति बने, और उसके परिणाम हमको दिखाई दे रहे हैं। आज समाज में जो परिस्थितियां हैं उन कोई भी अनभिज्ञ नहीं है। उसका कारण कौन? अभिभावक। क्योंकि अभिभावक उसको बचपन में, तुम अपना देखो, बहुत बड़ा बनना है, हम अपना सब देख लेंगे, हमने उनमें ये भाव जगा दिया तुम अपना देखो। बड़े होने पर जब वो अपना देखने लगते हैं तो हमें परेशानी हो, फिर हमें लगता है कि ये हमारे प्रति इनका जो कर्तव्य है वो कर्तव्य ये पूरा नहीं करते। तो इसका अर्थ अभिभावकों के प्रबोधन को भी हमको बहुत इंपॉर्टेंस देना पड़ेगा। जब हम अभिभावकों को इस बात के लिए प्रेरित करेंगे कि आप केवल और केवल अपने बच्चे के विषय में ये सोचिए कि एक अच्छा इंसान बने, वो जब अच्छा इंसान बनेगा उसमें सब अच्छे गुणों को हम इनकलकेट करेंगे तो निश्चित रूप से उसका भविष्य सुरक्षित है। लेकिन आज वर्तमान में इसकी बहुत आवश्यकता है। और तीसरी बात, संस्था चालक। तो संस्था चालक अपनी संस्थाओं में जिस प्रकार का वातावरण होना चाहिए, अभी सबने कहा मोटिवेशन की आवश्यकता है। वास्तव में संस्था चालक ही यदि अपने बच्चों को उन्होंने छोटा सा काम किया जिसके कारण परिणाम में हुआ, फिर उसको अप्रिशिएशन मिलना चाहिए, मोटिवेट करना चाहिए, तो फिर निश्चित रूप से वो अपनी संस्था के लिए, तो अपनी संस्था के लिए मुख्य कौन है? विद्यार्थी विकसन की दिशा में हम इन 3 आनंदशालाएं, अभी इनका नाम भी क्या है? आनंदशाला, यानी जिसमें इस प्रकार से इन सब करना, जब शिक्षक पढ़ाने जाए तो वो भी पढ़ाते समय विद्यार्थियों को आनंद की अनुभूति कराए। पालक जब बच्चों की परवरिश की बात करें तो केवल भौतिकता की बात ना करें, उनके बचपन को जीवित रहने दें, उन्हें बचपन का आनंद लेने दें, उन्हें भी लेने दें और स्वयं भी उस आनंद को ले। संस्था चालक तो वो विद्यार्थी, पालक और शिक्षक, तीनों के साथ समन्वय के साथ यदि हम आगे बढ़ते हैं तो फिर इसके परिणाम बहुत अच्छे होंगे। क्योंकि इस प्रकार के आयोजन से बहुत सारा आउटपुट प्राप्त कर चुके हैं कि यदि हमने इन सब का उपयोग ठीक से किया तो ये जो नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 है, इसके लिए हमको 25 तक या 30 तक इंतजार नहीं कर, हम उन्हीं शिक्षकों को अपग्रेड कर लेंगे इन आनंदशालाओं के माध्यम से। एक बात और यहाँ कहना चाहूंगी, अर्ली एजुकेशन की बात जब हमारे सामने आई थी तो उस अर्ली एजुकेशन में हम सनातन परंपरा के लोग हैं, हम तो ये जानते हैं कि जन्म से पूर्व भी बाल का की शिक्षा हो सकती है नहीं, होती ही है। क्योंकि अभिमन्यु का उदाहरण और ऐसे बहुत सारे उदाहरण हैं, ये तो एक बहुत प्रचलित उदाहरण है इसलिए सामने रखा जाता है, लेकिन ऐसे बहुत सारे उदाहरण हैं जिनसे ये पता लगता है। अभी कुछ अपने देश में भी ऐसे प्रयोग चल रहे हैं जिनसे मैं जुड़ी हुई हूँ, कि गर्भवती माताओं को विशेष वातावरण देकर और फिर जो बच्चा संसार में आएगा उसमें वो गुण प्रकार से बढ़ाए जा सकते हैं, क्योंकि हम जानते हैं कि गर्भावस्था में भी बच्चे का प्रारंभ हो जाता है। सबसे अच्छी और सबसे सुंदर बात है वो ये है कि इसमें मातृभाषा में पढ़ाने का आग्रह किया है। हम जब बच्चे को मातृभाषा में कोई भी बात बताएं, आज जैसे गायत्री जी ने कहा और रीता जी ने भी कहा कि बच्चे पढ़ तो रहे हैं लेकिन वो क्या पढ़ रहे हैं वो नहीं जानते। लेकिन यही बात यदि वो अपनी मातृभाषा में पढ़ेंगे तो उन्हें पता है हम किसके बारे में पढ़ रहे हैं, हम क्या जान रहे हैं। तो इन सब बहुत सारे ऐसे उदाहरण हैं जिनके माध्यम से हम उनके अंदर वो रोजमर्रा की छोटी छोटी बातें जो उन्हें जानना चाहिए वो उन तक बहुत आसानी से पहुंचा सकते हैं। व्यावसायिक शिक्षा की भी बात करते हैं। मैं कहती हूँ अभी भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, अभी कुछ दिनों पहले मुझे शिक्षाविदों की एक बैठक में जाने का मौका मिला, वहां उन्होंने मुझसे यही प्रश्न किया, व्यावसायिकता की बात करते हैं तो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कहाँ है, कैसे, ये तो है। लेकिन फिर वही बात आई कि केवल और केवल शिक्षकों की मानसिकता की आवश्यकता है। तब मैंने उन्हें एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल दिया, आप 5वीं और 6वीं प्राइमरी या मिडिल के बच्चों से क्या अपेक्षा करते हैं व्यावसायिकता में? आप कम से कम, क्योंकि व्यावसायीकरण का अर्थ ये है कि हम बचपन में उनके सामने बहुत सारे ऑप्शन खोल दें। अब उसमें से वो बच्चा अपनी क्षमता, अपने इंटरेस्ट के आधार पर किसमें ज्यादा रुचि ले रहा है, आगे आने वाले उसके जीवन के एजुकेशन में वो उसको स्थान दे देगा। तो इस प्रकार से यदि छोटे बच्चों के लिए आप अपने ग्रामीण क्षेत्र की अगर मैं बात करूं तो ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में कुम्हार है, प्लम्बर है, बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जिन्हें हम संपर्क करें और उनसे कहें एक दिन आप आइए हमारे विद्यालय, बच्चों को मिट्टी से तैयार करते हैं, मिट्टी से छोटा सा खिलौना कैसे बनाया जाता है, ये यदि सिखाने की बात कहेंगे तो उन बच्चों के अंदर वो व्यावसायिकता का भाव आएगा। हम कैसे इसको बढ़ा सकते हैं, धीरे धीरे फिर वो इस दिशा में विचार करता है। अरे आप एक दिन प्लम्बर को बुला लीजिए कि वंशी में भी आप हमारे यहाँ आ जाइए, तो टोटी लगाना कैसे, खोलना कैसे, कैसे अगर कोई ब्लॉकेज है तो उसको निकालना है। बातें बहुत छोटी है, लेकिन अगर ये जो नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 आई है, ये यही बातों को लेकर इसमें ज्यादा इम्फेक्ट है। इसी के माध्यम से उस परिस्थिति से बाहर आएंगे कि हमारा एक ऑटोमोबाइल इंजीनियर अपनी गाड़ी का बोनट नहीं खोल पाता है, अपनी गाड़ी को ठीक कराने के लिए एक मैकेनिक के सामने अपनी गाड़ी को ले जाकर खड़ा करता है। तो इसलिए ये जो एजुकेशन पॉलिसी है, बनाने वालों ने इसी को बहुत सात्विकता के साथ, पूर्णता के साथ बनाया है। सौभाग्यशाली है, ऐसी शिक्षा नीति हम सब के सामने आई है, लेकिन हम सब कुछ करते हैं, उनको बताकर अपनी वाणी को विराम दूंगी। हमारा सबसे पहला कर्तव्य है कि हम समाज में लोगों की मानसिकता बनाएं कि ये जो शिक्षा नीति है ये हमारे बच्चों के लिए किस प्रकार से उनके जीवन को विकसित करने के लिए। दूसरा, जो भी इसमें व्यावसायीकरण की या व्यावसायिकता की बात है तो उसके लिए हम इन छोटे छोटे एस्पेक्ट्स का उपयोग करें और उनके अंदर एक व्यावसायिकता को बढ़ावा दें। अभी कुछ दिनों पहले यूजीसी के चेयरमैन साहब के साथ बैठक हुई, तो उन्होंने कहा कि शिक्षा कृषि से विद्यार्थी, हमने एक कॉलेज के 15 विद्यार्थियों को गांव में ले, वहां किसान से पूछा आपकी क्या समस्या है। उन्होंने कहा आज हमको बुआई करने के लिए कोई मिल नहीं रहा है, धान की बुआई करना है। तो उन्होंने विद्यार्थियों को इकट्ठा किया, उन्होंने कहा अच्छा आज का हमारा टास्क है कि हम ये बुआई करेंगे। सच मानिए, जो बालक बालिकाएं वहां गए थे, विद्यार्थी वहां गए थे, उन्होंने कहा हम इसकी हाँ आज का टास्क यही है। और जब शाम को उन सबको बिठाया गया तो उन विद्यार्थियों ने कहा कि इस तरह के टास्क हमको मिलना चाहिए, गांव में आकर के हमें अध्ययन करना चाहिए। तो जब तक हम उनको देश की मिट्टी के साथ जोड़ने का काम नहीं करेंगे, तब तक उनके अंदर तो अभिमान का जागरण नहीं। और दूसरा, विद्यार्थी के अंदर स्व का भाव जगाना, स्वाभिमान का भाव जगाना, राष्ट्रीयता का भाव जगाना, इसके लिए हमें शिक्षक तैयार करना है। और इसीलिए हम सब के लिए सबसे आग्रह करते हैं कि एजुकेशन क्वालिटी इंप्रूवमेंट प्रोग्राम हम सब ने मिलकर अप्लाई करना है। उसके कारण हम देश में इस शिक्षा नीति को लागू कर जो कुछ हैं उन गोल को अचीव कर पाएंगे, तो ये देश फिर से विश्व गुरु के स्थान पर विराजित होगा। इसी भावना के साथ अपनी वाणी को यहाँ विराम देती हूँ। धन्यवाद।
बहुत शुक्रिया अरुणा मैम, थैंक यू। थोड़ा सा हम लोग टाइम एक्सीड कर रहे हैं, तो कर चुके हैं एक्चुअली, तो मैं थोड़ा इम्पेशेंट हो रहा था कि हम इतनी सारी बातों को अब हम कैसे समराइज करें, क्वेश्चन आंसर ले ना ले, क्योंकि हमने भी सारे पैनलिस्ट को 12:30 तक का ही टाइम दिया था। तो विद द परमिशन फ्रॉम ऑल द पैनलिस्ट मैं कहूंगा कि मैं 2-3 केवल की क्वेश्चन लेता हूं, और अच्छा होगा कि अगर आप कुछ आंसर क्वेश्चंस को जो आपको रेलेवेंट लगता है डायरेक्टली आप आंसर कर सकते हैं। आई कुड सी that Dr. A. Senthil Kumaran has already answered a few, तो आप लोग डायरेक्टली कर सकते हैं। मैं बस 2-3 क्वेश्चन लेके जो मुझे इंपॉर्टेंट लग रहा है और इसको हम खत्म करते हैं। लेकिन एनीवे उससे पहले मैं एक क्विक समरी देता हूं कि अरुणा जी ने क्या क्या बोला, क्योंकि बीच बीच में ऑडियो और नेटवर्क में भी थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम आ रही थी। तो एक सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट, विद्या जो मुक्त करे, जिसको सेम मैं भी कहता रहता हूँ, एंड मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम व्हेन आई एम पोस्टिंग ऑन ट्विटर माय मैसेजेस, माय की आइडिया इज लिबरेट एजुकेशन, क्योंकि उसको बड़े सारे बंदिशों में बांट रखे हैं, चाहे वो साइकोलॉजिकल हो, कंटेंट का हो, परमिशन का हो, लाइसेंस का हो, वगैरह वगैरह। मे बी वी नीड टू लिबरेट एजुकेशन। बच्चों में भय का भाव आ जाता है, फिर उनका एंगेजमेंट नहीं होता है, वो क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछ पाते हैं, तो इन सब से तो दूर हटना ही है। तो अदरवाइज तो हम पढ़ा नहीं रहे हैं, हम तो टेरराइज कर रहे हैं बच्चों को शुरू से ही। फ्यूचर का प्रॉब्लम का होता है, आजीविका को ध्यान में रखना होता है, तो साइज ऑफ पैकेज आपके पढ़ाई के बाद क्या मिलेगा उस पे बहुत सारा डिपेंड करता है कि आपका क्या सब्जेक्ट का सिलेक्शन करते हैं या कितने घंटे की पढ़ाई करते हैं। शिक्षा में तार्किकता, रचनात्मकता, नवाचार का भाव और सोच कैसे लाएं, वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, और मेरे ख्याल से नई शिक्षा नीति उस पे फोकस भी है। इन सारे मुद्दों को उन्होंने कवर किया है। शिक्षक एक मार्गदर्शक के रूप में, तो शिक्षक का काम थोड़ा थोड़ा, हम लोग भी कहते हैं ना, फैसिलिटेटर का ही बस रोल होना चाहिए। हर चीज आप पकी पकाई ना देने लगो, तो मार्गदर्शक के रूप में कार्य करें। संवेदनशीलता के कैसे डेवलप करें, जो कि आजकल धीरे धीरे थोड़ा कम होता जा रहा है। और जो बच्चों, जो आपने स्टोरी भी बताई कि कैसे एक बच्चा अपने टीचर से कितना कनेक्टेड था, उसने अपनी शादी में भी उन्हें बुलाया, वो सब संवेदनशीलता और एंगेजमेंट के कारण होता है। लेकिन आजकल उसकी कमी नोटिस की जा रही है कि बच्चे भी टीचर्स को जैसे का प्रोफेशनल सर्विस प्रोवाइडर में देख रहे हैं, या टीचर्स भी बच्चों को एक क्लाइंट और कस्टमर के रूप में देख रहे हैं। तो थोड़ा सा किस तरीके से किया जा सकता है। टाइम अगेन वी ऑल कीप टॉकिंग अबाउट कि विद्यार्थी को पूरे सिस्टम के केंद्र बिंदु में रखकर हम अपना सिस्टम, पॉलिसी, लर्निंग मटेरियल सब कुछ कैसे डिजाइन करें, तो स्टूडेंट सेंट्रिक अप्रोच होने की जरूरत है। सेम एंगेजमेंट वाले पोर्शन को घर विद्यालय में कैसे प्रवेश करे, विद्यालय घर में कैसे प्रवेश करे, तभी तो पेरेंटल एंड कम्युनिटी एंगेजमेंट हो पाएगा। और ये अगर हम पूरे इस शिक्षा प्रणाली को और विद्यालय को आनंदशाला, पाठशाला आनंदशाला बन जाए, तभी इसकी अचीवमेंट को मैं मानूंगा। थैंक यू वेरी मच अरुणा सारस्वत जी, आपका एक्सपीरियंस बहुत काम आएगा। और इन सारे डॉक्यूमेंटेशन को मैं समराइज क्यों कर रहा हूँ कि इन सबको हम डॉक्यूमेंट करेंगे, और जो फाइनल वैलिडिक्टरी वेबिनार होगा उसमें हमारी कोशिश रहेगी कि एचआरडी मिनिस्टर जी आए, जिनको हम ये सारे पॉइंट्स प्रेजेंट करेंगे कि इतनी बातें हुई हैं और इस पे ये समाधान आए हैं। एनीवे, फाइनली बस 2-3 क्वेश्चन मैं पिकअप करता हूं, कुछ लोगों को डायरेक्ट करता हूं, रेस्ट यू कैन आंसर ऑनलाइन हियर इटसेल्फ। एक इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन लेता हूं। The question is, there is a huge scarcity of competent teachers today, and teachers are by chance and not so much by choice. How do we address this problem, or how NEP addresses this problem? And connected hai ki, is there any provision in NEP to train teachers in a time bound period to achieve the goal? मेरे ख्याल से Dr. Senthil Kumaran, can I have you and then a few people जो कि, but keep it precise as precise.
जहां तक पॉलिसी की तरफ से, पॉलिसी टाइमलाइंस इज ऑलरेडी अवेलेबल ऑन एनसीईआरटी वेबसाइट, सो आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू कमेंट एनीथिंग ऑन दैट, बट ये मान के चलिए कि डोंट वेट फॉर अ सर्कुलर टू कम फ्रॉम योर रेस्पेक्टिव बोर्ड और गवर्नमेंट और फ्रॉम मैनेजमेंट। ये मत वेट कीजिए कि एक और सर्कुलर आएगा तब आपको काम शुरू करना है, क्योंकि कहीं पर क्या होता है कि लगता है कि हमारे जो 80% जितने भी गवर्नमेंट स्कूल, गवर्नमेंट एडेड स्कूल है, जब तक कोई सर्कुलर नहीं देता तब तक काम नहीं करता, बिकॉज दिस इज समथिंग विच इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। तो सबसे पहले अपने टीचर्स का मानसिक परिवर्तन करो, दैट इज आई थिंक माइंडसेट चेंज इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। सेकंड इज पेरेंट का ओरिएंटेशन करो, दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। थर्ड इज टीचर का माइंडसेट चेंज करो, उसके बाद ट्रेनिंग की बात करो। और आज आपके पास स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है, जब आपके पास स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है तो आप कैसे टीचर को कह सकते हैं कि आपकी क्वालिटी ठीक नहीं है? That is where I think it is very very important that we require something called as a comprehensive framework. जहां तक स्कूलों में ये जो असेसमेंट्स वगैरह होती है, सब शॉर्टकट चीजें हैं, ये सब खाली शॉर्टकट है, एंड ये शॉर्टकट्स मत फॉलो करो, थोड़ा लंबा चलो लेकिन अच्छा चलो, दैट इज व्हाट इज द रूट, बट फ्रॉम ग्रासरूट, दैट्स ऑल इज माय।
Okay, so next question I want to take, this is, when a child fails to learn, it is the failure of the teacher, not child, and that of the system. We have compartmentalized education into grades taught by different teachers, and there is no continuity of relationship between the teacher and the taught. We have to simplify education content wise, volume wise, at the foundational level, and intricacies can come in naturally as the child progresses. What are we doing about it? I think Dr. Abhinav Mathur and maybe Gayatri could also very precise answers, please.
So very quickly, this when I look at compartmentalization, I guess the amount of curriculum and the knowledge that has to be imparted to children is large, and therefore I don't think one teacher will be competent to be able to take the child throughout the journey. So I think compartmentalization is something that we can't live without. Unless until it's a homeschooling kind of a scenario where you are committed and therefore you are continuing the entire journey with the child. The second thing is we have to simplify education. Yes, most definitely, and the NEP has tried to reduce the curriculum definitely over there. So that is one welcome step. But I think by reducing the curriculum and putting a lot of stress on other skills, I think that has to a certain extent made the life a little more difficult for the teacher. And because the teacher at this point in time is neither trained for this, nor is the teacher even asked what the sort of skill development is happening beyond just numeracy literacy. I think we have to change the entire outlook of the education system as well as of the society to that extent, and that will become very very important as we move along. I don't think the NEP completely captures those things. I think it's more an implementation issue, and we should look forward to sort of certain provisions in the implementation aspect for these particular things.
Perfect. Let me take another question and then I would get to another panelist. There is one question related to, we need to upgrade the current B.Ed program. Yes, there is a provision. Initially, I in my slides also have talked about it. And then there is one question I think is the most relevant, and that is where I would love to close this discussion. Education is a continuous process from birth to death. Therefore, any educational process has to be continuous both for children and teachers. The most important part in this is the simplicity of content and process. What should be our strategy to make education flow simple and natural? So this is also a very simple question. Why are we complicating everything? Gayatri, any perspective on this? And then I would take Rita ji ka perspective also on this.
I think the simplicity can be achieved by goals, just as Dr. Senthil spoke about goals for teachers. If you have learning goals for children, that this is the minimum goal. A teacher can take a child wider and deeper depending upon interest and time. Right? And number two is when we set curriculum, when we say these are the topics to be taught, these are the concepts to be introduced, also try and say what are the must-have topics and the skills. If a child doesn't learn it this year, since we are following an yearly pattern and there are some of those structures that exist, these are the most relevant and the most important, so that as the child moves on, the child must have, and there are certain good to have, and give the choice to the teacher to take a call depending upon what works for most of the children in the classroom. So this is the sometimes for the most simplest of the questions, you have to write a book to actually try and give an answer. No easy answers there, but this is one thing that I can think about. Yeah.
Dr. Rita, any comments on this?
I'll give you in 3 points. One is we can have developmentally appropriate curriculum, age appropriate curriculum, and culturally appropriate curriculum. If these 3 things, if we can keep in mind, it will be very easy for children, and it will be the functional literacy and numeracy. It will enhance functional literacy and numeracy to the child.
अरुणा जी, आपका कमेंट इसी के बारे में, क्योंकि आपका भी पॉइंट वही था, आनंदशाला। तो हम कॉम्प्लिकेटेड बनाएंगे तो हमारे पाठशाला आनंदशाला कैसे बनेंगे? छोटा सा आंसर मैम प्लीज। अरुणा जी हैं या?
We lost her. She's there, but her mic is muted.
हाँ,
जी।
प्लीज आप क्वेश्चन रिपीट करें।
वही कि पूरा एजुकेशन प्रोसेस ना बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सा हो गया है, तो उसको फाइनली पाठशाला को आनंदशाला कैसे बनाए, सिंपल इजी चीजों को कैसे करें? छोटा सा आंसर।
नहीं, देखिए सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि जो बहुत सारा करिकुलम है उसको एज के हिसाब से बनाया जाए, और अच्छा जो पाठ्यक्रम बनाया है, जो करिकुलम हमने बनाया है, उसको उसकी जो नीड है के अकॉर्डिंगली फ्रेम किया जाए। क्योंकि हम क्या क्या देना चाहते हैं करके बहुत बड़ा करिकुलम बनाते हैं, लेकिन ये लगते हैं कि ये छोटा सा बच्चा इतना सारा सब कैसे कुछ नहीं जान पाता है। इसलिए सबसे पहली बात है करिकुलम बहुत छोटा होना चाहिए, और लोकल लेवल पर उसको ज्यादा एम्फेसिस होना चाहिए। लोकल बातें उसको सिखाएंगे तो बहुत जल्दी से सीख लेगा, तो फिर उसको पढ़ना जो एक बोर्डम हो जाता है उसके लिए वो नहीं होगा, बल्कि वो आनंद महसूस करेगा। छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल है, अगर हम जहाँ बच्चा रहता है उसी गांव में, शहर में, उसी के विषय से संबंधित बहुत सारी बातें, नदी है, ये नदी है, कहाँ से निकलती है, जहां से निकलती है उसको उद्गम कहते हैं, भले उसको लैंग्वेज आती नहीं है। वो जैसा अभी बताया था मेरे पूर्व वक्ताओं ने, हाथी का एग्जाम्पल बहुत अच्छा दिया था, आना वाला। तो उसी तरह से हम उद्गम शब्द कहेंगे और उसके साथ साथ कहेंगे नदी यहाँ से निकलती है ना, इसलिए बाकी कुछ नहीं जानता, लेकिन उसके दिमाग में ये बात बैठ गई कि जहां से नदी निकलती है उसको उद्गम कहते हैं। हम इस तरह से यदि उनको पढ़ाने का प्रयास करेंगे तो क्योंकि बचपन में छोटे क्लासेस में जो पढ़ाया जाता है वो बहुत लंबे समय तक बना रहता है, तो इस समय आनंद के साथ जब उन्हें पढ़ाएंगे छोटी छोटी बातें, तो वो एजुकेशन एक आनंद है, शिक्षा एक आनंद है, ये बात उसके अंदर घर कर जाएगी, तो जीवन पर्यंत उसे याद।
थैंक यू अरुणा जी। और अभी इसी के साथ सीधे मैं अशोक ठाकुर जी के पास जाता हूं, जो कि हमारे ब्रिज हैं, सूत्रधार हैं इन सारे प्रोग्राम के पीछे, जो कि साइलेंटली सुनते रहते हैं, ऑब्जर्व करते रहते हैं और सबको जोड़ मिला के रखते हैं। अशोक ठाकुर जी, फॉर योर थैंक यू नोट।
नमस्कार। आज का वेबिनार इतना उत्तेजक, इतना पथ प्रदर्शक और इतने विविध आयाम को लेके बैठा था कि सच बताऊं, मैं तो सोचता था कि थैंक्स नोट ना ही करूं, सुनता ही रहूं। दोस्तों, भारत का विकास भारत के चरित्र और भारत के स्वभाव से ही संभव है। विवेकानंद जी ने कहा था कि एजुकेशन इज द परफेक्शन, इज अ मैनिफेस्टेशन ऑफ द परफेक्शन ऑलरेडी इन मैन, and man is a creator of his own destiny which goes to the nation destiny and the whole world। भारत एक चिर युवा देश है और भारत में उसका युवापन उम्र से नहीं, दृष्टिकोण से देखा जाता है। ये हमेशा ये देश उमंग, उल्लास और उत्सव से भरा रहा है। क्वालिटी एजुकेशन की अगर बात करूं तो ये राष्ट्र के निर्माण, संस्कृति के उत्थान और समाज के प्रति उत्तरदायित्व में भूतकाल की समीक्षा, वर्तमान का मूल्यांकन और भविष्य की योजना। क्योंकि आज पूरी धरती पर मान्यताओं और विचारों का झगड़ा है। इस धरती पर कहीं भी महाभारत का रण नहीं चल रहा, देवासुर का संग्राम नहीं चल रहा, कोई कुरुक्षेत्र में पांचजन्य नहीं बजा रहा, कहीं राम रावण का युद्ध नहीं है। ये सब युद्ध क्षेत्र से निकलकर समाज, समाज से परिवार और परिवार से व्यक्ति के बीच में आ गए हैं। आज प्रत्येक व्यक्ति तंग हो रहा है। इसीलिए जिस तरह अमित जी ने जो बड़ा सुंदर दिखाया था कि नेशनल टेस्टिंग एजेंसी ने साल में 2 बार एप्टीट्यूड एटीट्यूड टेस्ट के लिए तैयारी करी, क्योंकि सारा झगड़ा तो मान्यताओं और विचारों का था। दोस्तों, कहीं ये मॉडर्न एजुकेशन इस पूरे विश्व में चारों तरफ शमशान ना बना दे, ये धरती, ये ग्रह शमशान का रह जाए और हाउंडेड प्लेनेट ना बन जाए। तो मैं यही कहना चाहता हूं कि हम शिक्षा के लोग ही सिर्फ जिम्मेदार हैं इस दुनिया को। वास्तव में जो अरुणा जी ने कहा था कि हम मंगल पर जाने के हमारे बच्चे तैयारी कर रहे हैं, ये शिक्षा ले जा रही है, तो मंगल पर जाके हम क्या संदेश देंगे कि हम पृथ्वी छोड़ के आए हैं या हाउंडेड प्लेनेट बना के आए हैं। मैं यही बार बार आपको याद दिलाना चाहूंगा, क्योंकि आज की बहुत सुंदर विचारोत्तेजक आज डिस्कशन हुआ, जिसमें रीता बहन ने बहुत सुंदर इसी के बारे में कहा, सेंथिल जी ने गणेश जी की स्थापना और भारतीय दर्शन से कैसे कैसे किया जाए, डॉक्टर अभिनव जी ने बहुत सुंदर प्रैक्टिकलिटी पर काम किया, गायत्री बहन ने बहुत सुंदर कि दुनिया सार्थकता ढूंढ रही है और हम योजना पे कर रहे हैं, और अरुणा सारस्वत दीदी ने जिस तरीके से आनंद शाला की तरफ ले गए, क्योंकि शिक्षा से अगर पीड़ा होगी तो आनंद नहीं होगा। और जितनी सुंदर अमित चंद्रा जी ने कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेटिंग किया, मैं कहता हूं दीपक खेतान जी ने जिस तरह इंट्रोडक्शन किया, एक बहुत सुंदर एक वातावरण तैयार हुआ। बैक ऑफ द स्टेज थॉमस जी और अंकित जी ने जिस तरीके से इसका परफॉर्मेंस बनाए रखा, और जिसमें जितने भागीदार, चाहे वो शिक्षण मंडल से हों या निशा से हों, सबको मैं धन्यवाद करता हूं कि दोस्तों अभी तो शुरुआत है, जिंदगी की असली उड़ान अभी बाकी है। हाँ दोस्तों, कई इम्तिहान अभी बाकी हैं, अभी तो नापी है मुट्ठी भर जमीन हमने, अभी तो सारा आसमान अभी बाकी है। इन्हीं बातों के साथ मैं अगले इतवार को 11 बजे एक और टॉपिक NEP एंड इम्पैक्ट ऑफ पैंडेमिक ऑन बजट स्कूल के साथ में आप सबको आमंत्रित करता हूं, आए और ज्ञानवर्धन के लिए और इस चीजों के लिए जुड़ें। डेफिनेटली कहीं ना कहीं तो हम पहुंचेंगे। और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, और इन सभी टीम मेंबर्स का आप सबके आने का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
नमस्ते, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Ashok ji. Once again, reminder, next Sunday, 3rd of January, we'll have another webinar, and the topic will be the impact of pandemic on budget private schools. As a final thing to tell you about the organization which has brought this webinar to you, NISA, which is a फेडरेशन ऑफ लो कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स फ्रॉम ऑल अक्रॉस द कंट्री, एंड भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल, जो कि भारतीय एजुकेशन में भारतीयता को कैसे समावेश करें इस पे कॉन्टिन्यूसली करती रहती हैं। थैंक यू टू ऑल आवर स्पीकर्स, अशोक जी एंड एवरीवन बैक एंड पे जो काम कर रहे थे। मिलते हैं अगले संडे को। शुक्रिया।